Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the special call meeting of the Temple City Council for Thursday, October 10th. It is currently about 12:25. So the first item is to discuss, have a discussion regarding the amendments to the UDC. It's my fault that we're here today. Jana said, I was in her office the other day, she said, she suggested that we do this at our next workshop. But it seems like workshop, we're on the workshop's full, we're kind of on a time frame, et cetera. And I thought that we've kicked the can down the road on this for about the last 6 weeks. So it's time for us to get some resolution for the applicants and, so I just went ahead and thought it made more sense to do this. We can just get it done and move on, but also allowing enough time for us to have a good discussion about it. So that's why we're here today. Again, I apologize for the special call meeting, but to me, it just made more sense. So the first item is, I think I read that in, didn't you? Discussion regarding amendments to the UDC. So, Randy, are you kicking it off?
Yes, sir. So, as you mentioned, we talked about this a few times over the last couple of sessions, really. And I think that a couple of active cases have caused us to come really kind of to the forefront while we're working on a more comprehensive solution as part of our updates to the Unified Development Code. And I believe that there's another code of ordinance that would also be impacted. But given the fact that we do have 2 cases that are pending that I think everybody wants to see some resolution on so that a decision can be made on those and we can move forward. We just wanted to have some additional kind of conversation about options and really kind of give staff an opportunity to hear from council on what y'all's thoughts are, and hopefully we can get to a place with both the overall recommendations for the code amendments, but also for any handling the 2 active cases that both require CUPs. Okay. I'm sorry, I had a moment there. They both require CUPs going forward, so we can also, before we are prepared to move forward with code amendments, we can consider some of those things that you may handle in code amendments in the future as a condition of the conditional use permit for these 2 cases that have been filed right now. So I know that Jason has done a lot of research and has listened to our conversations over the past few weeks, and has done even some additional research that he is ready to share with you today to hopefully spark some conversation and get some feedback that will help staff move these cases forward and the overall code amendment. So Jason, if you will go through your presentation, I appreciate it.
So from the standpoint of, this is how it started, this is how it's going. So the first picture you see there is from Lucky's RV Park. Been there for many years. Doesn't have a lot of developmental standards. Unpaved roads, the solid screening fence, not necessarily well maintained. We know wood fences don't always do well in Texas. You've got RVs with window units and RVs with permanently attached porches, fences, storage sheds. It's clearly permanent residential. How's it going? 2018, we amended the standards. Briar Flats came in shortly thereafter. I remember this was right when I first started working for the city. We were moving this through P&Z and council, going to public hearings. So I've kind of watched this one grow up over the years. I've had to go out there and visit recently to really familiarize myself with it. So that's the one on 317. Yes, sir. They advertise themselves as Briar Flats and Stables. So they're still more of a rural use. They're located in a rural area. You can see in that central bottom photo, there's the stables. It's got a barbed wire fence to the neighbors to the north, versus some of the other solid screening requirements. You've got a carport over that one. I don't know if that's the Park Coast or if that's some other, seems to be more of a permanent emplacement. You've got amenities. You've got a small pool there. It's not the world's biggest pool, but it's a swimming pool. You've got screening on the highway. You've got the street trees and that wooden fence they put in, as well as that berm. Is it landscaped? For a certain definition of the word, yes. Should we require every RV park to have landscaping equivalent to a golf course? I think that's more of a subjective decision. And then Bel Air Junction, which is the most recent one. In my opinion, probably one of the better designed, probably the best one in Temple in terms of appearance. You know, they've got that kind of 1950s theme to all the architecture of the buildings, the color scheme. They've got amenities of, you know, playground, splash pad. You know, they've got nice dumpster enclosures. There's some, you know, solid masonry wall. You know, that's looking back towards, that's the big logistics facility on that lower left. So they've got a solid masonry wall facing the state highway. When you get back into the park, it's not the same masonry wall, but it's not as visible from the public. And they've got walking trails through the facility. So very nicely done. I also went down to Gather Campground. This is brand new, came in February. This is not our code, this is Belton's code. So take that right up front. They're located a good 300 feet back from the interstate. They're on the frontage road, but their entrance lane kind of makes a curve. They've got a left turn, or excuse me, an acceleration lane at the entrance for vehicles to be able to slow down and safely get out of the way of traffic coming into the park. They've got some really nice amenities. They don't have the masonry fence. They've got that combination masonry wood fence you see in the lower left. They've got a big clubhouse, camp store, office. Very nice restroom facilities. They've bragged on that to me. And I mention that to say that our code requires amenities, doesn't give specifics. But as you go around, what you'll see is that not all amenities are created equal. Do we want to have a code requirement to specify ADA accessibility and white tile? No, we don't want to go that far into the weeds. If I did, Brian would come over here and steal the clicker from me.
Council wants to go, it doesn't happen.
Jason,
Yes, ma'am.
is this restroom or shower stall that size because of ADA?
It exceeds the ADA standards, but it lets them, you know, folks with a mobility device or wheelchair or even, you know, like a walker to be able to get in and out.
Good, yeah.
The interesting, I will kind of digress on this a little bit. We looked at some of the other park rules, and there's certain park rules that have requirements about their children are allowed to do, what they're allowed to do, supervised or unsupervised. Talking with the Gather management, they said that they wanted to have ADA accessible restrooms, kind of a requirement through Belton's code. They designed this, they're each their own sink, toilet, shower, one, you know, lockable door. It was designed with ADA accessibility. He said, but what they've heard from their guests is that it's the teenagers that like it because they now have a secure place they can go shower and feel safe. They have the privacy. It's not like my Army barrack days where you had 20 guys and 20 shower heads. And I'll leave you with that mental image.
Is this shower stall, I mean, are we looking at it, does it look so big because of the way the angle of the picture?
A little bit. I use the panorama function
Okay.
on my cell phone. I was standing right up in the corner.
Okay.
But it's a good 6 feet between the walls from side to side.
Does that stall area have sink and toilet in it?
Yes, if you look to
Okay.
the right where
Up
you can
this
see the
way.
guy standing holding the
Right.
door open, the sink and the toilet are just around that little half wall.
Oh, but not in here?
Not in the shower itself.
Okay.
They're just around the corner.
Okay,
So that guy that's standing there holding that door open, if that door is locked, that's one unit intended for one person
Correct.
at a time if they desire.
That's it.
Wow.
I
Yeah.
didn't, that whole, where
That's
he's,
one toilet, shower, sink.
oh my gosh.
There was, I think, 4 or 5 of those in the clubhouse that I was in where the office is and the camp store. There's another, I think, fitness area. They probably have the same facilities up there. That I didn't go that far into the site visit. And he pointed out that in terms of our requirements, that we require laundry, sink, toilet facilities, one for every 10 guests. But he said a lot of your higher end RVs, these big fifth wheels or these Class A motorhomes that cost more than your house, they have a washer and dryer and they have a shower that you can walk into. So is it something we want to keep in the code? I think so, but it may not be as necessary as it used to be. But what you get into very quickly is determining, is this a luxury park with only luxury RVs? Or are these regular folks that are here for employment and maybe they're in a travel trailer? So that type of facility is necessary. But we don't want to, I think, get into the specifics of requiring them to have that dimension, those fixtures, that appearance, just that there has to be a shower, a toilet, a sink, laundry facilities, so that people can live healthily.
I don't recall ever seeing an ADA RV, so I don't know if it was there.
Yeah, I don't know if the RV ones are that big, but they have,
No, I mean,
they have a shower.
I do in mine, but
Mhm.
I don't remember seeing an ADA. What is somebody doing there in an RV? If they can get in and out of that RV, they don't need ADA bathroom.
Well, maybe
Kinda
somebody lifts them in and out of the RV. It's possible. Probably
Just visiting
very
for the
small
day.
population.
Right.
Family.
Maybe
yes,
some
yes.
gas.
They visit.
For context, what's a daily rate on an RV park like that?
I didn't look
No.
at prices.
I ran
We
into
can
one
look
when
it
we
up.
went to a football game at College Station here a while back and stayed at a place similar to that. I think it was 50, something like that.
50?
The Belton Council's had some kind of robust conversation around, these parks. Are there a lot of differences between what we currently have in place and what they are doing as far as their
I
UDC?
didn't get real specific into their code. I was trying to skim around different cities, so
Sure.
I don't have a real good answer. So moving along, so specific for our, back to the question of how do we start and how's it going? We've got a lot of requirements in our code that guide how that park is going to be developed. There's requirements for trash containers. There's a requirement for the paving and the lighting for the pads, the drive lanes. The thing that I've learned, that I've been told from engineers and campground operators, is if you want to ensure a quality product, the first and best thing the city can do is require. Because you're going to require a level of investment that maybe an amateur isn't going to be able to achieve. If you're out in the county and you want to throw down gravel base and rent out your back pasture and put 24 RVs on there, have at it. But you're not going to do that in the city because the paving requires, you're going to have a bigger facility with more investment, and those folks are going to protect that investment. And it's not going to become kind of run down. So I think the paving that we already have, not just RV parks, but in our code in general, any commercial, residential driveways, paving required. So we're already there
From that perspective,
from that perspective.
in that arena.
Mhm.
Okay.
Our density is much, we limit it to 7 units per acre. And I'm gonna jump ahead real quick. If you look at some of the other ones, allow 10 and 20 units per acre. I'm not sure how you fit 20 RVs per acre, but I guess you're reaching out and borrowing a cup of sugar from the neighbor window to window. Seems pretty tight. We've got some requirements for buffering and screening. Solid fence, 6 to 8 feet high, could be wood, stone, concrete, masonry. I think that's something that was discussed previously. But we've got those requirements in there. We've got a requirement for recreational areas, not that it has to be a pool, not that it has to be a dog park, not that it has to be a splash pad, but that there's some amenity space. Talking to folks, the dog park seems to be a universal thing because it's easy to put in. Fence off an area of grass, put up one of those little greenway stations. It's a dog park. I have an amenity. Good job.
Seeing a lot of pickleball lately.
Mhm.
Right. And, on that's a new trend. Do we want to make pickleball a requirement in the code? No, because then 2 years, 5 years from now, but nobody's playing pickleball anymore, we're gonna look silly. So, I think it's wise to not be too specific with some of the requirements, because tastes change, the housing market change, whether it's a tourist campground versus a more long-term residential use. And there's some nuance to be found there. We've got authority to inspect. We can send the fire marshal out. We can send animal control out. Most of the parks have rules about aggressive dogs. Some of them specifically mention the breeds. Others just say, if your dog becomes obnoxious, we will ask you and the dog to leave. You may get one warning, or there may be no warning. That's the parks policy. We don't necessarily have to have the policy, but we have the authority to send city staff, the right city departments in there to make sure they're doing the right thing. There's a requirement for registration. So if they are letting folks live there more than 180 days, which is what the current code allows, they should be keeping track of who's there. There's a way to find out. Are they letting folks violate that 180-day limit? I'll pause right there and take a breath. Brian, anything? Want to add any questions up to this point? There's a lot of ideas, and I can tend to ramble around and go from one idea to the next. So I'm going to pause every so often and just bring myself back in. Let's talk briefly about the mobile home park. So Blue Bond of the States, Cheryl's the case manager. They're here today. Different use. Mobile home parks and RV parks, two different uses. Cheryl, do you want to just maybe talk through the mobile home expansion case and what the code is for that?
Yeah, well, I mean, not a whole lot to say actually on this slide, but there's two sections that apply to the mobile home parks. There's the section in the UDC that was recently, I want to say it was updated not too long ago, that there's a couple of requirements that we have up there, just general requirements. It was 9 years ago that was updated. In this particular case, for the Blue Bond Estates, there's only two exceptions that they're asking for. One is with regard to the setback. That the requirement is actually a minimum 50 foot front yard setback on the perimeter streets, and they're asking for a reduction of 30 feet. And then the other thing, the current code only allows double wide units. So they're asking for an exception to mix in mostly single wide units. And the percentage I'm sure is flexible, but at this point they're asking for 25% of the units to be double wide, so 75% would be allowed to be single wide. And again, that's kind of we'd like to have your feedback, whether you think that's appropriate or if you feel that, double wide is the way that you want to go, or if there's any flexibility in that. But I think that mix kind of reflects what you currently have on site in the older.
It's actually, we're double. And putting them on. With that being said, squeeze it, just still, yeah, 10.
Do you guys put anybody, or maybe with the research that planning has done? So if you have a single wide, do you limit the number of people that can live there? Or could a family still, husband and wife and half a dozen kids?
Search it. Sometimes. Yeah. Site two dimensions, living inside, we usually find that. Then we watch the cars. And we have an issue. The single wide nowadays is 16 to 6 3 2 bass. Surprisingly nice. 5 years ago.
That would be my only concern with having like a 75-25 split. Is if there was no sort of requirement around number of people living.
Well, I think there's, I want to call it federal crime. So many people put on other rules. Looked up that code years ago and forgot. So I want to go back and look at that. It's just because I haven't.
Like, don't we have some ordinances or something about non-related parties or like it has no more than 2 unrelated parties or something, where it's a family and it's not like a man camp?
I think that, I believe that's what he's referring to, those are standards.
HUD requires no more than 2 people.
That's what they call back down.
No more than 2 per bedroom,
I thought it was 2 per
Bunkhouse.
but nothing as far as relations. I mean,
Right, and that's their guidance that they issue. The maximum number of occupants should be 2 per bedroom. But that doesn't mean that that's a federal mandate. Never put more than 2 per bedroom. It really, if you follow the guidance and that's what they're following, then that's the number is 2 per bedroom. But it's just a guidance document.
The reason why I say, Mr. Mayor, is we're not totally trying to have a system of software to hit a flag, something like that. Just.
no, that's fine. I'm just trying to get my mind around, sort of what makes sense. Because, here, with all the construction going on, I mean, I could see somebody, renting out a mobile home, the 6 different construction workers who all drive 6 different pickups who all, and all of a sudden it's a mess there. That's my only thought.
So that's where I was seeing the non-related parties thing.
Right. No, I
If
guess.
it's a blended family and the man and lady and they have 3 kids each, then there's 8 of them, but it's 2
Right.
family,
Mhm.
1 family.
Of course, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Then, 1 friend, I think 1 non-related or something.
Of course, related but slightly off the topic, what you just said about, let's say you rent to 6 individual construction workers and you've got 6 big pickups, it's exactly what's happening in some of the relatively newer duplex communities that are being rented out and multiple pickups up and down the street. You can hardly get up and down the street. It's exactly what's happening. Good, bad, or indifferent, but we've already got that situation in another venue.
Okay.
And keep in mind that typical single wide unit, 1,200 square feet, that's also about the same as a typical duplex.
As a what?
As a typical duplex.
Right, exactly, precisely. But people that are working different shifts are renting out and staggering times they're there, but you still got all the multiple cars and pickups, et cetera.
That's one of the things that in my analysis of the park rule, the park rules already are gonna prohibit that 6 trucks, people jammed into 1 RV because you're limited to, 2 vehicles max plus
Per
the RV.
And that's much better than the analogy I'm just making to the newer duplex
Yeah.
areas.
That's our V park there.
That's RV park. It's not
Right.
necessarily for other residential.
No, I understand.
But we have, the same to be every accident. Towing, unfortunately, because we're very strict. We on the street, we will tow you, we'll call and take. We don't even know us to have authority. Street, right in the car. And we take pictures. So, and it's another safety. You don't want firefighters having trouble getting to the streets. So they don't park on the street. Occasionally, if they do, they will get towed. It does happen, unfortunately. We're very strict on it.
One of them, Briar Flats, specifically mentions not parking on the grass. They provide overflow parking. Most of the parks that I saw do, there's additional parking, whether it's for guests or deliveries or, what have you. they specifically call out not parking on a vacant pad. So just because the pad isn't being used doesn't mean you can just park your truck there.
Mm.
Unless you want to rent that pad, you want to rent 2 pads and park your dually, then hey, that's, the pad's being paid for, so they don't care at that. But that was the only one that specifically called out the, what they would see as a parking violation. Not necessarily something that we would enforce, but the park management would.
You can go back to the mobile home one.
Absolutely.
Um, So with regard to parking, because again, there's 2 different codes. There's also the city code of ordinance, chapter 23. If you go down like that second bullet at the bottom, that code requires 2 parking spaces per unit plus 1 space for every 4 units. Which for this development, that would be 31 spaces, and they're actually providing 83 spaces. So there's that overflow parking that he's providing extra, but into the code, they do have that provision to allow extra parking spaces. But again, going back to the UDC, there's a requirement for fencing and screening around the perimeter, landscaping requirement along the perimeter, the 15-year maximum age limit. That's all in the code right now, and those are all being satisfied. I live on it. And then the code of ordinance, chapter 23, that's the limit on density, and they're way below the density 10 units per acre maximum is allowed. There's a requirement for the minimum lot width. Again, they're exceeding that. A certain percentage is required for recreational area, 5%. This, their development would require 2.4 acres and actually provide a little bit more, 2.7 acres. Again, there's the parking requirement and then the requirement for 2 access points that's also being satisfied. And then connection to water and sewer. So they're meeting current code except for those 2 exceptions. But part of this is to make you aware of what the current code is. And are you happy with the current code, or do you think there should be some revisions to it? And again, these are just some of the highlights in those 2 sections. There's a lot more in those chapters, but I just wanted to pull out the main points that we're looking at.
To that question, I'll skip ahead, options to consider. There's a requirement for them to maintain the registry. What there's not is a specific guidance that says it has to be planning that goes out and inspects the registry, and they have to inspect it every month.
Just
Just
to
as-
clarify, Jason, that now we're back to talking about.
Yeah, RV parks.
And actually, there's just that one slide on mobile home. But they are different. They are.
Yes.
They are.
Well, and so let's slow down a little bit, because we're jumping all over the place. But each
Sure.
one of these, the land lease communities versus RV parks, that's different ordinances.
Right.
Instead of set aside, then can we just do them one at a time
Yeah.
instead of jumping all over the place?
Sure.
I'm a simple man.
You want to go back to,
Yeah, I don't care where we start or continue, but let's keep it to the one thing. So on the very top there, the first bullet, minimum 50-foot front yard setback required along further streets. What are the neighborhood, standard stick and frame? Or is it's just a standard home. What are the required setbacks?
depends on the zoning.
What's the
For ag,
what's the
for ag,
smallest?
something for ag, it's a 50-foot setback for a site built home, but for
Small,
single
yeah,
family,
smallest is 15.
15.
So,
Yeah.
That's-
That's property line. Is this property line or curb?
That's property.
So it's
30 feet,
still.
minimum of 30 feet
there's
between
still
dwellings.
They're
12,
still
50
exceeding.
feet back
Yeah.
on that.
That's right. And they're typically, they're typically not facing a public street either way. Anyway. It's for front yard. I mean, so we're looking at really the perimeter of the development and applying it. So
with
those
the
are not
mobile-
front doors typically
The
facing.
mobile home, you consider the direction that the front door faces is the,
Well,
Front, so-
I think the way we're interpreting the code is that, distance, where the mobile home can be placed, really not necessarily front yard, right? Because they're not facing the public
Yeah, so
street, they're not
I mean, the
facing.
front yard, that's basically, this is like one big lot.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
say where they have spaces between one big
Right.
lot.
what you consider front yard in a single family home is not gonna be the front yard. there.
That's right, it's
Right.
really just
And I don't
distance
know if y'all
from,
have a
distance from public
space where
street.
they place the mobile home.
You said
Space
density.
or
That makes sense.
it'd be from the interior.
Yes, yeah, and you put that on the site plan.
Talking to-
Talking about the 5 year olds. always just put 10 foot. See, 30 foot, those are the closest windows. On the top center picture is 30 foot. So it's about 40 foot. It's only two. It's not, I think the fence is, sure it's right on.
It's probably close.
Yeah.
Gives you a good idea.
So, but if you see with the ravine there, the ditch, that's still a lot more from the street. We're at, we're proposing at 30. Let's say, this means we may have. $30 is kind of where we're at right
But in addition to that, you'll be having screening. There's a requirement to provide screening there between,
now. Yes.
between the units and basically the property.
And just remember, like, Mayor, to your question, what is a stick-built home? That, as Cheryl said, these aren't on separate lots. So you're not saying that this has to be 15 foot back. Each dwelling has to be 15 foot back because it's all just one
Right.
large lot.
Right,
So it's
that-
really apples and oranges when you're starting to talk about
Well,
setbacks. Does that
yes,
make sense?
it does, but
It's
my,
not-
No, you get lost. I
So,
mean, each home is on a lot, right?
No,
no. So,
Like a
so
mobile
say,
home.
can you go back to the text?
But these aren't lots, it's one big.
no, they're,
Yeah, so
so
when it-
usually spaces like one, kind
When
of
it
like a
says
multifamily.
minimum 50 foot front yard setback, that's just overall the development. Whereas if you're talking about, if you're thinking of a more traditional, single family neighborhood, you're gonna have a setback requirement for each home. That doesn't really speak, that condition in and of itself doesn't speak to the density within the development. Because it's just saying what any one unit has to be set back from the perimeter street.
Oh, perimeter, okay.
But not how
Right.
close each unit
Yeah,
within the
I-
development can be to each other. Like you would think of a traditional
Yeah.
stick-built, site-built development would have setback requirements for each dwelling would be on a separate lot unless they were attached, but you know.
I
y'all
just,
understand.
I completely missed the word perimeter.
Well, and we do use the word lots, but it's really not lots in the sense of a platted lot. It's more or less the space, but it seems weird to say lots, but that could be confusing too.
But they're really
They're
not,
individual.
they're not
lots.
platted lots, it's one big,
We're really just talking about spaces as opposed to the word lot.
Yeah.
more like an RV park is in that
Yes.
sense.
Yeah.
It's just
Right.
lots or slots or.
but the reason for my question was around overall density within the, you know, how, can you just line these babies up side by side where, you know, to your point, you open the door and, you know, you can walk into the next one or, you know, grab sugar.
And
I mean, that-
I thought I understood your question, so I just wanted to
No,
point
no,
out
that was helpful.
that
though.
50 foot front yard setback does not speak at all to how dense
No, understood.
they
Yeah,
are
yeah,
together.
but in my mind, that's what I was
The
thinking.
second bullet under the chapter 23, say lots, but basically there's a separation between the units, which is kind of, will regulate the placement too. A minimum of 35 feet, 35 foot wide is what's required now, but they're
From one
proposing-
structure to the next.
Right. It's like structure.
So 17 and a half foot.
So to speak.
And then the maximum density is in units per acre.
From one structure to the next or the
No.
whole thing?
The lot,
Thank
the
Overall.
way it reads, it's lots.
Space.
But you got a 17-foot wide unit in there, then it's.
We kind of have an internal code of 20 to 25. As long as it satisfies the city. The city assures not to any time. Acreage, so I stay under, well under it.
So but to Mike's point, Mike, what you're asking is if the lot, right, is 35 feet wide and you put a 17-foot home, 17-foot wide home on that lot, then now you've got 8 feet on the inside.
And again, when you,
Plus another 8, so it'll be 16 feet
Yes.
in between buildings
If
if you did max density.
if you're gonna make a comparison to site built, you would have a minimum lot width and a minimum setback. So,
Right.
you know, conceivably, with the way this is, our code is currently drafted, if you could find a manufactured home that was 35 foot wide,
You could
you
take the whole
could,
thing.
you could stack them together. Fire code probably comes into play, but it just, I guess the point I was trying to make is that there's not really an exact parallel between.
No,
No, I understand.
but in a lot of
Side
our stick-built homes, it's 5 foot setbacks, so you're 10 foot. And that's not counting the roof overhang, you're
Right.
8 foot or
A lot of
less.
those are two-story.
But the difference in these is that that's pretty much that your front and back door are right there. That's where in a regular normal stick-built neighborhood, that's the side of the houses.
Side by side.
Okay, so council overall, what are your thoughts about spacing or?
Mayor, I'm sorry, can I point out one
Sure.
thing? So you look at the 10 units per acre that we allow. That's something you probably should really look at, because you think about that, acres, 43,560 square feet. So think about that. That would be the equivalent of 4,300 square foot lots, but that doesn't even account for private streets. And so that is pretty dense.
Pretty dense. yes.
It's pretty dense. And of course, what they're doing is almost half of that. So that number might be a big one if we're not gonna create, require lots, which then it's no longer land use community anyway. So think about that density, and that would be something to recommend that you really look at. Well,
Personally, I think the density would be, as long as we understand what fits on something well, would be better than saying distances there. Because
right.
it wouldn't bother me to have 4 of them opposed and then they all share a great big yard. I mean, there's single family home concepts like that and other things.
Yeah.
Cluster.
Yeah, the cluster things. So.
So what do? You set a maximum number of units per acre and then allow it to be arranged as the owner sees fit?
That's how the cluster communities are pretty much are.
Yeah, minimum distances. So, might be tweaking the minimum distances, which are currently in our code of
But then 35 feet.
30,
We're
okay.
talking about the spacing, there's not the setback.
So, but a distance between units, if it's 10 feet for fire code, well, that's minimum. Well, maybe it's 15, and 15 is minimum established, and then your overall density lowered from 10 to 7, whatever. But those parameters make sure that they're not too clustered, they're not too dense.
And just, generally speaking, I know you guys know this, but, when you're writing code, you have to write it not for, the developer that comes in, and has an eye for it and does, high quality development. You're writing it for, to protect, against the person who will come in and make it as dense as you allow them to make it. And so you can't keep in your mind, well, this one is a good quality one. You have to write the code for kind of your worst case scenario, unfortunately. And it makes it challenging, but you can't, thank you. You can't keep in mind, well, you can keep in mind, but you have to just realize that just because, gather or well, that's an example of one that is well done. You're writing the code to prevent the one.
And with that, with both the mobile home and the RV park, they're gonna get a site plan too. So it may not necessarily be in the code, but you're gonna have that visual representation. And if it looks to be too clustered or too tightly packed, then that's where you can raise those subjective concerns. Ask the applicant to show, what's your spacing from wall to wall? So there's that addition to check.
Yeah.
Okay, so,
Oh, yes, thank you.
so
That's something to-
But Fran, in reference to that also, on one level, I think we're trying to look at setting a code that if you build today, that the code is gonna keep the quality there rather than, which is, goes back to what Jason said, keep the quality there so that there's less chance of declining. And Jason's emphasized that the paved roads that would make the difference or help make a difference.
I think that's your starting point. That's your filter
Yes.
to make sure that your operators are bringing you a high quality park. Don't necessarily.
Because you're basically forcing the operator to build a higher quality park to begin with, and assuming that
Mhm.
means the operator is going to stay in business and keep quality there, and if they sell it, we'll sell it for a higher dollar amount.
And I wasn't speaking even in particular on land lease communities or, you know, just in general. The
Right.
challenge with code writing is, you know,
No.
most of the
you're
time you're dealing with someone who is really, you know, caring about their investment and is making a high quality product. And you don't, you know,
Right,
you don't have to worry so much about it. But every once in a while, you know, you'll get the person who just does absolutely the bare minimum. And so your code has to reflect what you accept as the bare minimum, because
Right.
you just can't rely that there are occasionally the people who, you know, don't approach it from, you know, keeping, you know, making their investment. But
but.
that would do what you would hope they would do regardless of the code. And it really doesn't have anything to do with land lease communities. I just wanted to remind you of that challenge as we talk about what some of these minimums would be. Just keep in mind that what we're thinking about
Yes.
is not the people who are gonna do it right regardless of what the code says. You're really just trying to protect against what is the minimum you would accept here. That's what your code needs to
Well,
have.
this is very, very important, not just for what we're discussing today, but I will make the analogy again to the duplex communities that are being built and have been built around District 3. And I get lots of calls complaining about why didn't we do something earlier and not allow that to occur? Just a ding, da ding, da ding, da ding, Pete Seeger's little boxes, for those of you who are old enough to remember Pete Seeger's song. People are just concerned about it. They want to look at something different.
Generally, I mean, from my perspective, density comes into play with a lot of things. You know,
Yes.
it's usually not, just in my personal opinion, it's usually not the product or, you know, that's not the problem. It's just, you know, how the density and
Hard to code.
the mix. Yeah, and
Make it
it's hard.
hard for taste.
It is. You
It
can't,
is.
you can't legislate good taste, as they say.
Well, we also
Right.
have, I drove through, my friend lives in Sage Meadows, and those are single family, but they're big 3,800 square foot houses right next to each other. They still have 2-car garage, and they've turned a lot of them into rentals with,
Yeah.
you can't drive down the street. It's dangerous.
Precisely.
So it's not just
No,
rentals
no,
or
it isn't.
mobile homes or anything
Not
else
at
that's
all.
having that problem.
You're absolutely correct.
Jason, there's trails as one of the amenities, right? I noticed that just back to the RV park. The amenities are they required in the mobile home communities as well? Certain amenities,
To require trails.
I mean, it's
just, you know, what type of,
For the mobile home park. Look at, the third bullet under chapter 23, 5% is the like a recreational area. That doesn't
Okay.
really get into specific amenities. That's because up to their discretion. If they want to.
As opposed to 8 for RV park. Just for comparison, I'll also want to point out, as I'm thinking about the density question. Does it make sense that we would allow 10 units per acre for land lease community, yet only 7 for RV parks? You know, and so that there clearly are some, those just don't fit, you know, even though they're completely different. You think, okay, well, typically you'd have more dense RV parks than you would land lease community. Well, our code is actually backwards.
okay.
Also with the density also, and kind of where I was going with the Sage Meadows is my neighborhood has more density per home, but the homes are 2,000, 2,500. They're not
Square
600.
foot.
Yeah.
You're talking
Yes,
about.
so if you're just talking density, is that 5 or is that 10 single wides or double wides or triple wides? And you start getting more people in. You start getting more people in a square acre just because the houses are bigger.
Sure.
So,
And just speaking out loud, I think it'd be difficult for us to regulate density of people, because you don't know, it could be a family of 5, it could be husband and wife and 4 cats.
But can you do it by the square footage of the buildings? Or
It's tough. I mean,
That's gotta be-
I would recommend specifying parking spaces because I think we extrapolate from our city.
Yeah.
You have to have two parking spaces, but we don't have a max parking spaces. And so allowing single wides, like they're doing, because ultimately it's about density, like you said. So you have double wide in theory is, maybe it's not twice as many cars or twice as many people, but it's more. And so allowing that flexibility, because that's the equivalent of a duplex. And so, that's the difference between a 2-bedroom apartment versus 3-bedroom apartment. That, the prohibition on single wide, I'm not sure if that, whatever was intended at the time, I'm not sure if that really applies today. Our concerns are more about traffic, the maintenance, and in theory, a smaller dwelling unit is in theory also easier to maintain.
Seems like probably only needs 2 parking spaces, the double wide maybe 3.
Yeah,
Well, I was
exactly.
just
So,
asking. Dale, if there's a difference in the number of bedrooms, single wide versus the double wide, and what do you want to ask?
Some of them are the same. We- so big difference. You get 5 people. Get a double wide or maybe triple wide to units of acre, which is a good thing. And I think it's in there probably for the consideration of the sheds. It's also in the code. One thing that other cities have done, since we're talking about redefining interest, part of it, just to kind of be that highest. Some of the other cities do have just a term structure. So this unit. So that would help. We don't do that because it's just fine. That's what some of the other cities do. Is structure, with the only consideration, always the city would be because you have sheds in the code. Because I read into this in Harker Heights, they say we have to from each home. So shed has to be 10 foot. So when you run into that, then all I can do is put a 5-foot shed right in the middle of those 2 lots, which encroaches on. It's actually 2 shed for their lot, so it doesn't work. It kind of butts heads when you run that. So maybe a consideration for the sheds, but the actual homes, units, what's worked in 3 of the other cities that I do is have distance between the structure. 20 foot is kind of long. It just mainly aesthetic for the aesthetics of it. It's just, it doesn't. And I'll be honest with you, because our park was built in 73. There's some homes that might be a little tighter than that, but we do it side by side and back to try to keep them working. And that 20 foot on each side, that's it.
Shall we move on to the?
No, let's stay on this.
future options or stay?
No, let's stay. Could the code be written in such a way, or I guess, I'm sure it could. How would the code be written in such a way to allow for cluster? And still, you know, with an eye toward overall vision.
Well, I mean, so we have, in the comp plan, we have a cluster developments kind of, you know, that allows that, but also requires a certain amount of open space, and that's something that I think a design that is proposed in the EDC updates. Keep in mind, that's for stick-built homes, and so as Dale was talking about too, you know, I think still having that distance, probably a minimum of 20 feet, is still a good idea, you know, when you compare flammability. You know, I mean, a mobile home is going to go up a lot quicker with a fire than your typical stick-built home. So plus, you know, so I think you still have to have that minimum.
Sure.
And probably 20 is a good place to start. And then if we were to say increase the 5%, you know, so the recreation area is 5% minimum currently. RV parks, it's 8%. You know, once again, they are different, but you think about just kind of the overall look and density and open space, you up the open space requirement, and then, so then they may cluster, and yeah, in that open space, you know, would be a certain amount of it's going to be recreational areas and qualify, and some of it's just open space that, you know, to run in and play, but not necessarily recreation. I don't know if that makes sense, but
It does. As planners, have you ever seen anything, you know, for the health department for septic systems have so many square feet of drain field for by the number of bedrooms? Have you ever seen anything like that in any codes for?
This requires currently connection to city water and sewer.
It does. I'm not saying septic. I'm just, that's how the health department makes sure that they have enough drain field
right.
or based on number of bedrooms, just because there's an average occupancy, I guess, per bedroom. But if we're trying to space them out and we didn't want as many double wides in 5 acres as we would allow single wides, or have you ever seen anything like that? Where the density is based on bedrooms.
Yeah, and some multifamily codes, but not for this. But then again, I haven't seen too many manufactured housing codes either.
And I'm not even just talking about this. Like I say, the Sage Meadows is a problem for that very reason. Because
Right.
5-6 bedroom homes on the same
Sure.
density as 3-bedroom homes in other neighborhoods. It is an issue when you
Yeah.
get into the parking and
That's right.
use of the streets and all of that.
Right. So there are a number of ways to address the parking. One is just let out.
So do we just ask staff to go back and write something up based upon this conversation? Staff, what works best for y'all?
To give it many directions.
Yeah.
I think we have. I mean,
I think, let me make sure I understand the objectives for today. It's obviously to make progress for the code, but it's also to look at not only Bluebonnet Estates, but the RV park zoning cases that are active. And so that we have some guidance of what kind of conditions would apply for
Right.
those when they come forward. And that the code amendments, you know, that is something that, you hope that they line up. But the idea is, you know, take those projects and with see how that works to some extent. And the code amendments, you're giving us guidance, but it's not necessarily, this could be a longer term discussion of, hey, we're starting the conversation. We don't have to decide on the code for these today.
But I think that the conversation we've had today will speak to Blue Bond Estate.
Right.
And that's what I was getting
Yeah,
at.
exactly.
So I think that, have we given you guys enough guidance around the Blue Bond, around the code to speak to Blue Bond Estates also? Or does it even apply since Blue Bond Estates already exists?
No, I think it applies more for the code amendments. I mean, when you look at Blue Bonnet Estates and what they're proposing, I mean, without asking for a vote, I mean, are y'all generally comfortable with what they're proposing? Because our code can more closely reflect.
Right.
I would say that.
This is more about a CUP now than.
I would say that if we had a code that allowed what they're proposing,
Yeah.
I like what
Sure.
they're, I mean, there may be some little thing I haven't never speaking, I like how that one looks and what they're proposing. I don't know how everybody else feels.
We wanted fewer units per acre from down 10 to about 7, right?
Which they're doing 5, right?
Right.
So, yeah, which,
And then we talked about the recreation area. I think we have 5 and it's 8 with RVs, 8%.
Yes.
So we want to increase that as well.
I have a question about that though, because here we have it as recreation area, which to me seems more like green space or park or playground. Does the other code speak to recreational areas or is it amenities, which would be more like,
Just.
Both.
like the bathroom area?
Yeah, the bathrooms are not considered amenities, so it is specified as recreation. Recreation areas, minimum 8%. And so, yeah, I think. Perhaps,
Recreation and
Well, it's a-
amenities are.
it's a-
Yeah.
right,
like,
right. So
single family
amenities,
is a combination.
that's
but
right.
you
It's
can-
a
You
combination.
can have land or so many
Green space.
dollars worth of it, so it could be smaller with.
We have some instances where
1,000 or-
the developer can pick, if there's a list of 6, the developer picks 2 or 3,
Yeah.
which could also include, trees, on that list.
It can, except for ones that are required, I suppose.
Okay.
But with our park fees, when we do it by money, don't we? Land or money, or it's a combination.
Either they pay fees based on the number of dwellings, or they provide amenities at or greater than the amount of park fees they pay.
And the land, the amount of land calculates into that at an average price or something, doesn't it, a lot of times? If you give an acre and an acre is $20,000 in that area, hasn't that been calculated in?
So
I've
that's,
seen the acreage on, we've seen.
that's not
budgets.
code, that's practice.
Just
So when someone wants to do, say, a private park, which that's a whole nother conversation.
You
which
mean like an
clearly-
HOA?
Yeah, HOA, which of course those come to you all right
Right,
now,
right.
the current code. It's common practice and everyone seems to like that. But either way, in terms of our parks director evaluating whether a private park meets the intent, the equivalent of the public park, the value is sometimes considered in terms of the land, but more so about the amenities and the
That's
cost.
not written in code.
That's
just
not, yeah,
practice.
that's just kind of a policy to,
I know we're still on mobile homes, but the question is, what is the difference with the RV parks? It says 8% of the gross site area for recreational vehicle parks shall be set aside as open space for open or enclosed recreational facilities. It lays out what can't be counted. And it says it may include swing, slides, playgrounds, picnic tables, swimming pools, trail, fishing ponds, and community use facilities for adult recreation and other like amenities. So it doesn't require that it's any one of those. It doesn't say you can't have a swimming pool or that you have to have a dog park, but it gives them some option, but the space has to be there. So if I'm reading this right, the clubhouse with a fitness center, that would be part of your recreational 8% space.
Didn't you say green space or recreational
It
space?
says
So
open or enclosed.
yeah.
So that's what I'm saying, a fitness center would be part of your recreational.
But that's where what we're doing in practice with our parks and regular neighborhoods is if you don't have an amenity, you have to have more land, but you can have less land and more amenity, which
And I mean, what you're gonna find though, I think my experience in visiting lots of campgrounds and RV parks is that they're not gonna do a fitness center. I mean, the cost to be able to do that versus, you know, a trail, an open space and a trail and plants and trees, which is what people are generally looking for. Most are not going camping to go to the gym. You know?
but you can buy what, an RV and this, you can just have a field.
Yeah,
And that's not an amenity to anybody, probably, I guess there's a little bit of something.
You can fly a kite in that field.
Yeah, maybe it's.
It's a dog's.
Recreation. One thing that we're not exactly addressing is that one of the applicants before us, presently has 3 more parks coming behind that one. And yeah, we're not looking at how many we want, or maybe we can't. Maybe we just say, okay, we're gonna make all the standards as strong as we want, yes.
so there's more on the RV parks in this presentation.
Yes.
And, you know, and you'll find that there are some considerations that kind of help address that concern for RV parks. And it could apply to land lease communities.
Right.
As well. For example, one thing that we've looked at is a requirement that RV parks specifically, but once again, could apply to land lease communities, new ones, that they don't have their frontage, you know, that the entire length of it is not all fronting on that public street. Yeah, obviously they'd have to have a 50-foot entrance, kind of a flag lot, but we're, you know, essentially reserving lots for future development, like minimum 300 feet.
Right.
Which would essentially be the minimum for future retail development, so that they would have to create a lot, you know, lots, 300 feet
Right.
for future development, so that one, they're buffered because they're pushed way back. And two, it doesn't, you know, the highest and best use over time is, you know, market would allow for, in theory, development along the frontage that they would not be taking. So that is something that is,
You're right.
is a consideration
It is.
to
It's
address, I
important
think, mayor's
consideration.
concern. I think he brought that up previous meeting, but that's in a future slide. So we
Is there
can-
any?
Yeah.
With either one of these, has there been anything, and maybe to address some of the concerns I've had with only so many of them per square 5 miles or something, where we
I mean,
don't have
yeah,
just,
you could-
Well
that's,
said.
I think that's what Susie.
Yeah, so-
What I'm-
We don't want a whole
Thank
city
you,
full of
yeah,
really
yeah.
nice trailer parks or really nice RV parks.
Sure.
We just don't want too many.
There
of
could
them
be-
at all.
There could be a distance requirement, whatever that appropriate, you know, it's not, we're talking a different scale than, say, tattoo studios where there, you know, minimum distances between them. And so,
What is that on those?
So
I mean, that's.
1,000 feet.
So
So you wouldn't want,
that's-
you know, it would need to be proportional to say maybe it's a mile or whatever. That's the
Or
crow
2
flies, property line, property line.
I have no idea what's appropriate, but I think
Yeah.
that's.
Some
That
kind
is what I'm getting at. You said it.
Yes.
Thank you. You organized me.
Yes, so that, I think that's something that, I don't believe we have a bullet on there. That's the kind of feedback we're looking for.
And whether that's something, and I'm just gonna speak out loud, just like you are, is that something that is put into the code, that it's a hard limit? Is it something that's put into the conditional use permit criteria? Is it within, you know, we look at liquor stores, we look at other CUPs, is it compatible with the neighborhood? Is it too close to churches or schools? Well, maybe one of the CUP criteria for an RV park is, what's the distance, what's the other nearest RV park? 500 feet, and y'all can vote no.
So if it was, with that criteria, is something that we have to look at, but it's not a hard set rule, is what you're saying.
That gives you the judgment to say, maybe it's less than a mile. Maybe that mile feels longer because of the geography, or I don't know.
Right.
Maybe there's a rail yard in between there. So who cares?
A
There's an
rail
RV park
yard?
on either, maybe there's an RV park on either side of the BNS.
Oh, okay, I
And
get
you've
it.
got 20 rail lines with box cars clanging through the day.
Okay.
You know what? maybe that,
Good, you're making us think.
you're making me think too. I've learned more about RV parks in the last 2 months. It was comical. My nephew decided he was going to propose to his fiance, so my sister, who they have an RV. They got their travel trailer. They were going to come up to Arlington. There's an RV park right in the middle of Arlington. And I'd never stayed in an RV before in my life. She was, you can just stay with us. Well, first I found out that I'm too tall to sleep comfortably in that little travel trailer. But we walked around the site.
You're
Saw
talking about Arlington, Virginia,
Arlington, Texas,
Texas, okay.
right in the middle of town.
Yeah, I
Now, this
know.
one, they allow permanent residency,
Yes.
skirting, porches, hard PVC pipe for the sewer
Right.
connection. The residents had like Dallas Cowboys and Shiner signs tacked to the wood screening fence. These folks live there permanently. You know, that's not what our code allows, but just having stayed in one, you know, was an eye-opening experience.
Well, I have a friend who lives in well, now I don't know whether it's RV or manufactured home, lives in something in Florida. And I talked with her this past weekend and said, what are your thoughts? And she said, make sure you write in there that people can't hang their laundry out.
Mhm.
That's an issue in many parks in Florida. It's maybe never an issue here, but.
That's,
Okay.
That's interesting.
Did I miss that?
well, no, this is.
Oh, close, I missed it
That's in the park
entirely.
rules. A lot of the parks, no clotheslines, no laundry.
I missed it entirely, thank you.
No, we haven't gotten there yet, so.
We haven't got there.
No, but we had this.
Is that-
Oh,
and I
sure,
read it
no,
that an
carefully,
RV?
but I didn't-
That is true.
Analysis, not.
That's an RV.
But that's the RV part, not
Thank you,
necessarily
Chris.
the.
So in the effort to kind of wrap up the guidance for land lease communities, what I'm hearing is reduction in the overall density. At least just say, 0.7, because we know that what they're doing, 5.7, that looks right, but we're going from 10 to maybe 5.7 is not a good round number. 0.7 at least to say it shouldn't be more dense in a land lease community than an RV park, maybe. And so let's at least just say they're the same. 7 dwelling units per acre. The distance, so establishing that distance between structures or like the dwelling units, 20 feet. Could be 25, I don't know, but 20 feet clarified, hey, that exceeds fire code, that exceeds our typical stick-built, single-family detached zoning. We don't typically see 20 feet separation from most of our single-family neighborhoods. So 20 feet seems like a good place to start. And then that also applies on the backside too, as Dale was mentioning. And perhaps increasing that recreation area minimum percentage. Just let's at least have the same number there. I mean, just so we can all be further confused between RV, what difference between RV parks and land lease community. But at least some of those standards may make similar sense. We'll look at how that is defined, so it's clear that there are amenities in there, and it's not you can't just have an open field necessarily. Because we already require recreation areas, but maybe further define that for you all for both those types of developments. And maybe we need to establish, maximum number of parking spaces, per unit. Right? And because we're gonna have overflow parking requirements, which is good, but just, I don't know, that's and also allowing
Per unit
single-
or
we could do it either. We can,
Right now it's per unit.
so we can
I would
apply,
like to see somehow.
Apply it
something
by bedroom.
defined the bedroom. or
Yeah.
something.
we can do that. We can bring back a standard related to bedrooms. That makes a ton of sense.
Parking
Yeah,
spaces
The
for,
challenge with that though, just thinking through is because you can move out a manufactured home and move a different one in that
Yeah,
has a different number of
That is-
bedrooms, so
that is true.
that would
So
be something to think through.
Yeah.
Not that we couldn't figure something out, but
that
that's
is
something to think.
very, very true. So at least just establishing very clearly, it would help staff too, just how many parking spaces are they required to have? And how many are they allowed to have? They may be the same number,
2 in the middle.
too, yeah. So I mean, so that's,
Brian, I think one other thing I heard was, and I think y'all didn't say it, but I kind of got the sense that some flexibility, so maybe as a evaluation criteria in the CUP, the distance between the next, most, nearest, existing park, but
yes,
not make it a hard, like you have a
Okay.
certain distance that
value.
I
but
like
it's
that.
just, so you could consider, you know, other land uses or,
Okay,
but that is, it is documented as one of the evaluation factors.
seven double wides per acre is different than seven, single wides. So does anybody care about that? Because if, you know,
I think we should.
then you're putting basically 14 single wides on an acre.
because right now,
Seven.
right now, it's basically saying you can have,
Whatever you
you
want.
can have 10 double wides per
Right.
acre.
Right.
So if you at least say, well, no, now you can only have 7, and we're allowing single wides, you know, then you're further reducing probably the
And hopefully you get some,
overall number of
Single
cars
wides
and people
instead.
living there, but
You
I
make
think
a
the
ratio
triple
between
wide.
single to double.
That's triple the problem. So.
it's prohibited, triple wide. I don't know.
We can think through, I think we understand the, you know, that
Yeah.
it's kind of a density, that the, you know, single wide versus double wide versus triple wide, the concern there is not aesthetic, it's density. We can think through how we could, propose some solutions. I don't have anything off the top of my head, but I think we understand where we're trying to go, so hopefully we can brainstorm some.
but let's go back to,
solutions.
Bluebonnet Estates and their CUP. Carol, do you have anything else here that really needs to be added? I mean, to me, like Max said earlier, these changes seem very reasonable. This is one of those where I think we have a good actor, right, to Bryn's point earlier, versus a bad actor. So,
And they're meeting, right now, they're meeting all the current code except for those 2 elements, the setback for
Yep.
the, on Perimeter Street and the double wide versus single wide.
And once again, we don't know why the 50 feet is currently required, but 30 is still more than if you were to look at a traditional single-family neighborhood that you typically have distance from house to Perimeter Street, and then you're typically not gonna see 50 feet.
and so planning would support this.
Yes, and we
These two
support
amendments.
looking at that provision in the code too and saying, does it need to be 50? We don't think so.
Right.
It's like conceptual or binding.
Site plan, it would be binding because it's a CUP.
And I think yours is pretty much ironed down, because I sometimes,
Yeah.
right,
Yeah,
or not,
well, no, it is. We've updated it with double wides. and
right.
everything has changed, so. As long as everything else stays the same. nothing- we can-
And they're pretty much meeting too, all the changes that you were suggesting, except for the recreational area. Is there only you're meeting the current standard of 5, but I don't know that you'd meet that 8, we change it. to-
Right,
I
so,
don't think they
so
would do that.
2.4 is required, they're doing 2.4.
Do they?
Can you do
2.3.
8%?
Yeah, because it's.
But you have
That's,
a playground or
We have a
the,
playground, we have a swimming pool, or we have a screen area. I'm not sure if that's considered in that.
That's good, that's included in there.
It
The
is.
one at the very corner, yeah, that's included in there.
But We were well, now, the only thing is, well, over parking spaces, we have to cut through those out. Still stay with. I think we have plenty.
Do you have any idea how much your overflow, right now, how much your overflow parking is being used? Now, I think you're showing on the new one, you're showing like twice the overflow.
Yes,
Well, it's like 31 to 80, something almost 3 times. Is that right?
yes, yes,
Back to that.
yes, it's,
Because right now, you're providing, the 31 spaces would be required, but you're providing 83.
Yeah.
On the overflow.
yes, we're well over that. We're talking about the current partners.
Yeah, just for a matter of context, how many used?
Yes.
What would your requirements be with what you have on the ground right
I
now?
drove there right now. They probably do it there.
Out of how many?
It's an existing part, so.
Right.
The current code is, let's see.
Well, are you out of compliance? Are you out of compliance right now with the overflow parking requirements? You don't have enough right now?
No.
So this 83,
Not
this,
for- we don't.
But you still have some left over most of the time, and you
Yes.
don't have as much as the current code.
Yes, we
okay,
So it sounds like our current code more than covers that.
yeah, it isn't. So the only issue is getting from 5% to 8% possibly? Carol, is that what you were saying?
I think so. And,
He's saying he can meet it.
yeah,
He said he had the
I'm not sure if you can.
No, we can't. Just take.
You can put some pickleball courts in the overflow parking.
It would need, I mean, just a rough calculation, it would need to go from 2.0 acres to about 3. Yeah, a little over. Yeah.
All right.
We have enough
They pick the
guidance.
ball
that we
right.
been bringing something for the existing park that we did as children.
Yeah.
Yesterday, understanding that space constraints that it has to keep expanding to creating new.
And just for my clarity too, because again, the current code is all double wide, 100% wide. Pretty good change from it. I wasn't here when that requirement was put in there. Not sure if there's a benefit. What was the requirement to be double wide versus single wide, but just want to make sure that's a big change. So is everybody comfortable with that change?
I am. That's it.
You know what your mix is now? The reason why I'm asking, because I used to live there. I drove by that so I'm fairly familiar with that. park.
So it is, 155 single wide, 19 megawatts, 12.26%.
Okay, so 1 out of 8, basically.
So, and we're asking for 25, so we're doubling that.
Does that bother anybody?
Is there any, do y'all have any rules on the material or stuff like that? I don't think y'all have any rules, metal sided.
Which helps.
How many acres?
The city has some, it's on this skirting. General.
The age of, yeah, the age of structure.
Yes.
And none of the, so they don't build the new ones like that anymore.
That's right.
The metal, like I grew up in.
About 30.
They don't build them anymore. We have the 15 year thing that takes care of it.
Yeah.
Oh, the total size, both old and new is like
do the
47
15
acres.
years.
so the new
I just
parks
didn't
are
know if they
really
were still building them.
And putting
No, definitely not.
how many units
Oh, really?
on the next
That's what
one?
they're saying. They don't build the
The
old metal ones with the silver,
Yeah.
the tires on.
That's right, yeah.
Like I grew up in one.
About 125.
Don't you wish you'd grown up in a.
All right, everybody okay with?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Everybody okay with this? Without voting, you'd vote yes on this? Okay,
Have we driven you mad?
Not at all.
Liar.
Are you firebombing us tomorrow?
I'll tell you after you vote.
Whatever works out for the last,
No.
If
Okay,
you're gonna firebomb a facility, this would be, just make sure nobody's in.
okay, so we have enough now to bring this forward Thursday. First reading.
As a planning
the public
department,
hearing.
happy. Do you want more, something out of us, more visiting? We already had the first.
Oh, that's right, we did. Yeah, we
I
did.
think we're good.
We already.
We heard you.
Yes,
Jason,
yes.
you're good?
So guys, council members, this will be second reading. So speak now or forever hold your peace. Okay, all right.
I just re-say, somehow, Mike said it, where'd Mike go? Anyway, Mike said my major concern was, not density within the units, density within the city,
Yeah, they've got
or
that.
numbers within the city, maybe not even density per se.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, we're putting land lease to bed and we will start on RE parks.
I'm gonna go back. That's current code.
Hmm?
I go back to that slide for the current code for chapter 31. That's kind of scan through that.
it again.
Let's take a 5-minute break if anybody needs it. Yeah. Ones have already wandered off.
Okay.
Yeah, give you know your box.
I think I want my key. I didn't touch the part. Sometimes that's too much.
But do you love cats? No, I'm saying wrong.
Pardon? Yes, that's the word. Thank you.
Fried cat?
Environment.
You go forever. There you go.
What do you think?
Sorry, but you're.
That wasn't what I was talking about.
He told me they were like ready to go.
I don't know.
I didn't know.
The music, like, it's like. And I really.
Oh, true, because we are.
Yeah.
Jessica, those are very small.
Yes.
That's why I feel like I can stay up and have to.
That's good.
Yeah, second floor, get out here.
Well.
Give it a second, it'll open, that's right. Wait a little.
Yeah.
Raise your right leg.
Yeah, that's right, there you go. Play black. Then you call it up to do it. Yeah, there's two power.
Yeah. They had these signs that said no dogs.
That's a lot of
I wondered. Back to
Back to it.
All right, and that concludes the presentation for our parks. Any questions?
We can start later.
No. We talked about this briefly. This is current code. You know, there was some discussion with the mobile homes, the manufactured homes, about the spacing between units. The RV park doesn't have it. It's got some spacing from public streets or property lines. There was that density of 7 units per acre that we talked about. But there's not that same code requirement for the RV. We talked about the 8% for the recreational areas, but that the specific amenities in the 8%, that's up to the management. There's a list of things that they could do from what I've looked at. You know, it's fairly common. It's a pool, it's a dog park, it's a playground, or a splash pad. There may be a camp store or some other clubhouse. I think where I was starting to, and the mayor said, slow down, let's keep on one subject, is those last two, the authority to inspect and the registration. So we do have those requirements in terms of, do we get a good product? Does that stay a viable, attractive development after it's approved, after it's been occupied for a while? And my answer to that is the inspection and the registration. That's our tool to make sure that they're holding to their own standards. And what will get added to that, if I can get this to,
Sorry.
there we go, is first of all, put common ideas in the same place. That's been one of the themes with the overall UDC update, is the parts of the code that are referenced together should be together. Don't make them skip forward and backwards from chapter 8 to chapter 4 to chapter 3. So we've got language about defining the park as being for transit and temporary housing, that there's a maximum duration of the stay, which is in a different paragraph, 2 or 3 pages later. And then all the way at the end of the missing requirements is the registry. So we could just reword and rearrange chapter 31 without changing the requirements, but just to put them in one place to where, if it's hard for the planner to find it, who reads code for a living, how hard is it for the park manager or the developer or the public who wants to know what the rules are? So we could put those together, but then put some specifics of what the registration should include. When do we go check it? Is it monthly? Is it annually? Do we make sure that they, one, have a set of rules? Most of them do. But more importantly, are they enforcing their own rules? There's an old Army joke about your annual evaluations. And there was a joke evaluation that went around for someone who was the worst soldier and the worst non-commissioned officer ever. It says, sets standards so low that he even fails to achieve his own standards. So let's make sure they have standards, but then let's talk about, and I'll say let's as a group talk about, how do we enforce they enforce their rules? Do we get a copy of the rules during the CUP process? That seems like a pretty easy yes. But who checks it? When we check it? When I talked to Bel Air, they said when they started, their rules were 2 pages long. Over time, it's grown to 5 pages because they found there was things that their guests were doing that were unacceptable. So
Like
they've
what?
expanded their
Did
rules.
they tell you?
Letting dogs run around, speeding.
Hanging
Um,
laundry outside.
hanging-
Oh, I will add that I hang my laundry outside and I have neighbors who complain and I live on an acre and a half of land.
They want to control it.
So one of the things that, you know, we're thinking, if there's a process where we are going out to check them every so often, are they giving us an updated copy of the rules? Are we requiring them to have specific rules? You gotta have a maximum diameter of the campfire ring. I don't think we care. Fire marshal may disagree with me. that can be part of his inspection. But we want to see that they have rules and are enforcing them. And it will help us if we know what those rules are. So make that part of the CUP review process. Not that the specifics of the rules are important, just that they have them.
And Jason, just to be clear, if one of their rules is hang laundry,
Yeah.
not to hang laundry outside, if we are inspecting, we're not gonna tell them, hey, you can't hang your laundry outside. That's beyond what. we
Right.
would-
That's kind of like HOA rules.
Exactly.
Yep.
And that's where us requiring a copy of their rules and to have that be part of the CUP is no different than required for residential development. So we're treating them fairly.
That's really important to say.
I think so.
That's, very important.
So how do we make that transferable if someone comes and buys it 5 years down the line?
So I'm gonna jump, I want to come back to this slide, but I'll jump ahead. That second bullet, should the city require the RV park to register with the city with an annual renewal, similar to what we have a registration for the mobile home parks? Should we make the RV park follow that same process? During that renewal process, that's when we could get an updated copy of the rules. If it's a new owner and they have new rules completely different, KOA runs it different than Gather. Well, hey, here's my KOA rules. This is what we are following now. We want to allow clotheslines. Hey, that's your part. But we have some visibility of that. Even if it's to the point when someone calls Susan and says, they got clotheslines in it, their park rules allow it. It's a new owner. Now, do we as a city want to ban clotheslines? But that gives us the mechanism of having the visibility and the enforcement by having the RV parks be a renewal. I'll pause there for some questions and discussion.
If it serves a purpose, if it's just a thing they gotta do.
Sorry, this is leaking all over the carpet.
Oh, no.
Oh,
Sink right over here.
oh,
I'll
you're-
go ahead.
So what's the registration fee for land use communities currently to register every year?
I should know that, but
I used to know that, but I forgot.
yeah.
Really
I mean,
low,
is
it's
it-
like $20 base fee plus like 25
Yeah.
cents per lot, somewhere around there. It's really low.
If it serves a purpose, but we've discussed like roofing permits. They're just paying $15 for what? If this serves a purpose, then I don't.
Right, and right now, we're transitioning, and Kelly has facilitated that implementation for land lease communities to ensure that there's an inspection attached. So right now, it's really more of a registration process than a true,
If it has,
but this,
if
yes,
it has that, then I like it.
right. So we don't want to add a requirement that doesn't serve the public purpose.
But I like the idea of they do a fee to cover our inspection, and the fee serves a purpose, and the registration serves a purpose, and we're getting inspected annually. I like that.
As long as those things actually get done.
Yes.
That's it's great to have all this infrastructure set up, but if no one ever inspects it. And if the inspection is easy, number one, or number two, if to not pass inspection doesn't come with, some real,
Gee,
I hate to say punishment, but with punishment, right?
Consequences.
Then, consequences, there you go. Then what's the point also? So, because to me, a lot of this is around public safety. Yeah, we just shut down them all over that because that was important enough. So,
That came from an annual inspection originally, right? All, right?
And that's where that bottom where it says authority to inspect, it lists who's
Go to space.
Who's on the hook to go do the inspection?
We already have the authority to inspect, so.
Right.
Maybe staff could talk through that and bring back a recommendation to see if there would be any benefit in adding the registration versus just, saying every April, we're gonna go inspect.
I have something to add to that. So we have done a trial run with fire and code compliance on a mobile home park. I know, thinking this is transferable to RV parks, but it went really well. And we're implementing this whole process through MGO so that we can assign inspections, we can actually have a process. We're also wanting to take that responsibility off of the city for sending out letters of, hey, by the way, you need to register. It's just going to be a known thing like every year. It's just going to be written in the rules. It's in the final one this year after we get it all implemented, letting them know, but it puts that responsibility back on the property owner. And so they need to make sure that they keep up with the registration. And we will have something in our system that flags us that we need to check it. But just kind of shifting that responsibility and also providing a mechanism to do those inspections and have results and be able to better track them.
If we just have the mechanism that tracks it in red flag or sends a flag up once a year that it needs inspection.
Yeah.
That might serve the purpose and the
I think,
registration doesn't.
I think maybe if y'all will permit us to kind of have a little bit more staff discussion, because I think if we're gonna require something that we need them to give us, then the registration may make sense. If we are just gonna go, look at things we already know about, then that may be just an extra step that doesn't help anyone. And I just don't, maybe we need to, let's just look at that a little bit. After we know kind of everything we're wanting to include, I think we could make a good recommendation whether an actual registration process would add value or if there's another way to accomplish that without that.
So what is there in chapter 31 that staff needs council, thoughts on?
Let's talk about the length of stay. Because that's something y'all have raised.
I think when we go into that
Yeah.
specific, just, I would note that this chapter has been updated more recently than the land lease community. So, Brian, was that 2018 or 19?
Yeah. it was
So it hasn't been, I mean, that's still, time goes by. That still was, some time ago at this point, but it's not, it has had a more recent look. So some of those things we talked about with the land lease community right now, like the density, the appropriate acreage for recreational spaces, we've already incorporated some of that. But I think there's probably a couple of other areas that Jason's gonna lead us through here that we may need some guidance on. And then I would guess, unless you tell me differently, I would think that you would also want that distance requirement or distance consideration to be part of the CUP review process for RV parks, related to how far away is this proposed park from the nearest park that currently exists, so that we have some consideration and some intentional evaluation of the I forgot what we called it, density or concentration of this use. And then Brian also mentioned that I think that this would hit back towards something we heard maybe the last time we talked about this was maybe some requirements related to reserving out frontage and just making sure that, we're seeing the community develop kind of to the highest and best use and maybe not having, this may be an immediately viable use, but you don't want it to preclude something that, that would be viable, 10 or 15 years from now. So I think they had some thoughts around that as well.
Jason, also, before I forget, because I'm not sure if we have it in the slide, but you pointed it out, that Gather has added, probably for TxDOT, they left turn lane, and so something.
Decel
Or
lane.
decel lane, but something to consider for both of these, but maybe for RV parks more so because they're they're moving the RVs regularly are, you know, improvements related to acceleration lanes, deceleration lanes. Make sure that they have that, so they're not, you know, RVs are taking a left-hand turn,
Right.
but they're not blocking, you know, a road that right now is a, you know, local rural street that eventually,
Will
you know,
not be.
yeah, and but for now it is. And it's a different
You're saying
conflict.
we may want to put some of the things in that Tech Stop will take care of it if they're on a state highway, so that we have that if they're not on a state highway.
Yes,
Right.
That's a good point.
absolutely.
What I would say to that is, I think the size of the park matters. There's one on the road where I come in, there's about 24 trailers there. I don't think that's gonna need a turn lane and decel lane all the time. There's not enough traffic coming in out of that park to warrant it. By all means disagree. 150 units, absolutely, because that starts to hit what our subdivision entry code. And where my mind starts to go, like you said, the ones we've had so far, for the most part, have been on state facilities. 317, we've got 2 on 363 Bel Air, and then this one, we've got another one that's coming in off of Dare Road. Okay, so that's our road. So, you know, 2 thoughts. If it's on a state road, you defer to Tech Stop. Their engineers understand what's needed. I'll be honest, I'm not sure why they didn't require turn lane or decel lanes for Bel Air. I'm really curious on that. Don't know. Maybe it's different
Especially-
engineer, or different. But I think going forward, you know, defer to them. Not to say that y'all couldn't make the requirement because it's the CUP process. You can always add the condition. But as I think about it, because we've talked about the same requirement for a TIA for residential projects. We've applied our subdivision entry standards. That starts at 75 units. And then at 150, and you start hitting different thresholds where a single entryway isn't sufficient. And you either need to have 2 entrances or you have that 41-foot back a curb. May or may not be divided, but you've got enough widened pavement space to allow that traffic to flow a little bit smoother, especially with the RVs making that wider radius. So, and we've applied the subdivision standards to the RV parks. At some point, maybe it's not that there's a TIA requirement for the RV park specifically. And we've talked about this with the UDC update. I know it's been kicked around and it may not be popular. But if we're going to talk about it specifically for the RV parks, is it worth talking about it overall? That above a certain threshold of dwelling units, that's when the TIA is needed. So it's not specifically tailored to the RV parks. It applies to everyone. So that may be a little bit bigger picture than just chapter 31, but I think it's worth thinking about.
At the first public hearing on all of this, those 2 women brought that up. I never thought, sorry, hiccups. I've never thought of it. But it's very obvious when you're talking about large vehicles.
When I went up to visit Bel Air, I first went by 363 for the new project. You know, it's in maybe 2 miles around the bend up to, you come over the overpass and you're coming down, and yeah, there's no turn off lane.
Exactly.
And yeah, the need for that one to have had at least a, you know, right turn lane and a turn out lane is obvious. Talking to her, the manager at Bel Air, they would love to see that center turn lane because they've seen people coming down 363 from I-35, slow down to make a left turn into the park and get rear-ended by an 18-wheeler.
Oof.
So, and I'm pretty sure Kenny Henderson, I'm not going to put words in Kenny's mouth, but he mentioned that the shoulder on 363 now is wide enough that if we wanted to require them to stripe that, we could do that easily.
We what?
If we just wanted to say, apply striping, just
Oh,
paint,
striping.
paint the
Yeah,
existing
yeah, yeah.
shoulder and say that is your turn lane, that could be done very easily. We could require
I
that.
think Kenny said that at the
Little-
hearing.
Yeah,
A little bit of things. Huh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah,
Those are being phased out.
Not politically correct, so,
Are you
Yeah.
talking about those little bumps?
yeah.
Yeah.
They're
They're phasing those
yeah.
out.
Probably.
Yeah, they're not using those.
But they're there, right? I mean, they would have to fill those things.
Right. Well, now there's the
Yeah,
the
the little
rumble
grind-
strips. Yes, yes. I thought you were talking about the raised marbles.
Oh, the rumble.
Yeah.
The dugout little bit
Yeah.
of things, whatever they call them,
The bumpy things.
driving my barrel, but
It's driver feedback something. Forget the exact term,
Yeah.
but yeah.
but those are there, they'll have, if we make them do that, they'll have to
Right.
somehow fill those in.
Yeah. So yeah, could you require something similar to what's on the lower right-hand side? Absolutely. Yeah, and there's space there to require it. When I spoke to TxDOT when the Belton Engineering project came in, would you require the TIA? They said, well, we'll make that determination when they submit the subdivision and they submit their entrance permit to connect to the highway, but more than likely that they will.
But they didn't up at the other ones, so.
Yeah.
But more than likely is awfully amorphous.
Yeah,
I was happier with that until you spoke about them not doing it right around the.
right,
corner.
which is why I think it's worth, for the specific case that's coming forward, for y'all to add that as a condition. Would I say that needs to be a blanket part of the code? I would say no, because they're not always gonna be 100, 150 units, they could be smaller
Well,
scale.
down in the little, what's the street off, the next one,
Dairy Road,
Dairy.
yeah, Dairy, I mean, then you turn in on there.
right, the volume of traffic on Dairy is probably would not warrant having that additional pavement. And then, back to the first point that I made, if you want good quality parks, requiring pavement, requiring the paved paths, requiring a turn lane, it's gonna increase the cost, it's gonna keep the amateurs out of the game. And if that's the choice you all wanna make, then you're free to make that. But there's a certain point where, how much expense do you wanna require from the parks on the front end? And then understanding what the second and third order effects of that decision may mean.
Well, I can tell you what it means for Gather, because I just looked it up. For a Saturday night stay at Gather, and if you're not there for a weekly rate, just nightly rate is $72. Weekly rate is 52. So that's what it translates to in terms of their standards are overall very similar to what we currently require. And so that's the translation, kind of a 70-ish dollar per night, unless you got a weekly rate.
They have monthly rates?
No, I just saw week. But they do market it, they market
do
it
extended
to
stays.
specifically. So Meta construction worker, Baylor Scott and White, long-term care
Facility needs.
facility needs, essentially all kind of what we talked about in terms of the law, once we talk about the limit of the stay, they're directly marketing to those
So they got allowed to longer stay or.
apparently. So that's what it's-
Well, all of those needs are very realistic.
Yeah.
Very,
especially since Baylor Scott and White doesn't have their
exactly.
RV park any longer, which probably never met any of her standards.
Lena's talked about that her dad was in the hospital for the last 9 months of his life, and they were staying in an RV park for 9 months while he was there.
Did she say where?
I think it was.
9 months, wow.
But she was talking about that with if you try to
Yes.
make a 30-day thing, then that doesn't.
Well, I mean, and that's a very valid point in this community.
Yeah, both managers that I talked to said the majority of their guests are contract workers. They mentioned Solar Farm, they mentioned Meta, they mentioned Scott and White, and Gather even specifically.
Samsung.
They have people from Samsung at the Taylor project, because Taylor has no more space. They're coming all the way over here because they can find a nice place to stay.
I have a cousin that was a welder on a pipeline for years and years, and his per diem was in the buy a trailer.
Yeah.
So every big job he went to, he bought a new trailer. They paid for it, you know, food and everything, still made money at it. So that's, the folks that I have renting from me, they get $110 a day per diem,
Shoot.
7 days
That's
a week.
food too.
Yeah, lodging and food, yeah.
Right.
But still, that's, I mean, that's $3,000 a month.
Yeah, but
On top of
$110 a day at these rates doesn't go very far. You're gonna be
Unless you
eating a
bump
lot of chips.
Unless you bunk with two other people.
Well,
That's just.
Yeah,
then
they did that. That's
then
what they
get
did.
their pay on top of
Yeah.
that. That's just pretty.
oh, right, of course. Duh.
And
There's
the, and the weekly rate, remember, is $52. You don't know what the monthly or the longer term
Right,
rate is,
right.
so it would
Yeah.
conceivably be even less than that, so
But
I could eat for that.
yeah, it's a fine line between, I wanna be able to allow both of those scenarios, but I don't want the man camps like they have down in the oil fields.
Yeah,
right.
Because they're
They're permanent.
You don't want,
they're horrible looking. I mean, they look like what you would think a man camp, they look like a 500 person bachelor pad out there.
and you don't necessarily want
Yeah, I don't want
sheds,
that.
and window units.
Yeah,
So we've looked at it and I'll throw it out for, you know, some questions. Is the 2018 change went from 3 months to 6 months. When I talked to Gather, I said, if you were to write the code, what duration would you set? He says it's not about the duration. He says just, it's about having good rules and good
Yes.
yes.
Yeah.
Bel Air said, I'd be happy with a year. And you could leave it at 6 months, but allow certain number of guests to ask for an extension. You could allow that extension, but it's still not a permanent stay. They're not allowed to put up skirting. They're not allowed to attach porches. They're not allowed to hang clotheslines. So are they a permanent resident? No, they're a long-term resident, but could that RV be easily disconnected and moved tomorrow? Yes.
I think that's personally, that's the way to do it, if we can make an ordinance that says that.
Right.
Also having perhaps the employer provide a letter, some kind of authorization that they're, you know, they're here for a job from, you know, this period. And,
Would we do the same for the hospital?
yeah, I mean, whoever, you know, whatever.
Well, another
is written in the
scenario
code.
is people that move to town and there's not a house to buy.
Sure.
We've had that issue lately, if they're building one, it takes a year.
Or maybe,
No,
to
that's
use the
true.
example, you know, maybe they're here in town to care for an elderly parent. End of life care. They're not here long enough to buy a house. They need to have their own space for their peace of mind. So if, you know, do they just write a letter saying, I'm here for my dad? And do we accept that? Now, the question is, who authorizes that? Does that go across Brian's desk? Does it come up to Bryn? Does
No.
Bryn delegate it to David? Do we bring it to
The answer is
council?
no.
You know?
I'll be happy to, just give me some criteria.
Yeah. So I think that's
Ray,
the
we don't
question.
want you to be bored, you know.
I feel like we could set some reasonable. I think maybe having a standard that you could use if you feel like someone is, you know, not. It is not following the rules versus having to proactively check everything, seems like a better way
If
to
you
do
go,
it for me.
if you go out there and it looks horrible, then you can pull, how long have you been here? Hey, you gotta get, but if it looks
Yeah.
fine, then you don't check. 'Cause how
We
I
want to
would think
catch
it
it
works.
before it looks.
Well, that
horrible.
goes back,
It's
that
not
goes
a
back
problem
to
until it's a problem.
good actor versus,
We want to keep it from becoming a problem.
Exactly.
that goes back to good actor versus bad actor.
Yeah.
Right?
During
Because,
the annual inspections,
And
you
having
could
the proper
check some
rules.
of you could check some of the records of the site manager and put that on them.
And as Jason
But you're not
started
checking
all
the-
of
you're
this
not
by
checking
saying
the
we need to
actual-
pave the
you
roads.
shouldn't actually check the RVs.
But it's
You're
also
gonna walk around and
similar,
say that one's substandard now.
similar to, you know, a lot of them have the rules of RVs not over 10 years old, but there's plenty nice looking 30-year-old, 40, 50-year-old, The one you said, the little silver one.
Airstream.
Airstream, not
Oh my
from-
God.
They look nice, you don't necessarily.
Right.
check
They could be
their-
50 years old and redone, you can buy them
Most
for
of them-
200,000.
On that, most of them set a rule, I don't know if you can see it, third row down, Bel Air says 12 years or older, but send us photos. And the other
Yeah.
ones have language that says it's 10 years unless we approve it. So you can send your photos, look, it's 12 years old. The thing's vintage.
But how do we,
You're fine.
Exactly.
which
There
the
you
parks
go.
can do that,
It's up to the
how,
park.
how do we do that as a city? We're not gonna check it, we're not gonna check pictures.
I hope we don't get into that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean,
Cause that's kind of good act, bad actors
Yeah.
by the park owners.
exactly.
Yeah.
We're not,
That's we need a full-time staff member
Yeah.
to do that.
we don't want that, but how do you,
What are we-
how do we keep the bad actor park owner from not checking the pictures and letting the Lucky's RV stuff in? Well,
Don't know.
their roads.
yeah, make them expensive.
Yeah,
Build the roads to begin.
I would
Which is
say-
required now.
I know, and that's where Jason started this
And-
whole
and I think
conversation.
it's gonna be that second, third order effect. If we require the pavement, we require some other, conditions that they have the rules. It's, if someone has that, I'm trying to say this carefully and politically. If someone has a RV in poor condition, are they likely to be able to afford the rent over the long term?
Expensive rent.
Is that really our concern?
Yeah. And if, and I'm gonna switch ideas again, but all these things, you start to see they're all connected. Where we looked at Gather's entrance is 300 feet back from the front of
It's more
your.
like 500.
Yeah, because there's that tree, there's a big stand of trees there.
Yeah, 300 is what we were, the line
Yeah.
we were proposing, but yeah, there's more like 300. I mean,
That's
500.
important to me, because
Yeah.
visually, I know that the whole idea of Bel Air is, that, Googie style architecture and stuff, that's all real
Glamping.
cute, but, that's all you see when you turn, and, I mean, there's just like a sea of RVs, and it's really, to me, I think it's really attractive. So I like the idea of Gather being kind of up and over a hill, so it's not visible from that way.
Yeah, there.
And I'm gonna.
Eventually, Bel Air, eventually the trees.
Do they require,
Dina sent this
Do they
right
have
before the
some
meeting,
training?
so I didn't,
do they have some trees there? Because
They-
I'm like Jessica, I don't notice the trees for all the RVs.
Right, it'll be a long time. They each have at least
So
one
this is what
tree.
she wants.
that's the owner has given some ideas of what they might do.
What's the size
That's depending on whether they,
Do it.
if Academy
Yeah.
moved in there,
It'll be a
I
while.
said, well, what if Academy moved in and said they want to buy the front? So he's-
And
Yeah,
the,
so it depends on the retail
Academy being
storage,
the store
the
academy.
storage, the sporting goods.
Right.
Just throwing that as an example.
Oh,
You can
okay.
pass it, like I said, Lena sent that right before this, so I didn't get a chance to add it to the presentation. But the project that they've got on 363, the park bonder is 800 feet back from 363. So there's a good amount of separation there. So that may be something that,
to the egress thing, the exit.
Mhm.
Cause if I remember,
Yeah.
if I remember right, I either added
That's a
a
parachute
amendment or
out.
something that they have for
She showed us
extra
that,
road.
right?
Yeah. They'd still be on there, it's just free.
turn that back over. They're showing
Over
that.
here.
Yeah, that's that, right?
That's that one.
Yeah.
So they're showing that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
On
Oh,
the
no.
one on 317, if they're that far back that they own the land, and can they do that if they have so many spots? If we're trying to make that one of the
Right.
rules,
I don't know that we would be able to do that retroactively.
but I'm saying,
Bel Air is, Briar Flats, once you go past that berm, it's probably a good 100 yards.
not about the other one that Lena's other people have. If they're so far, and the one that's coming, this hasn't got here yet, if they're way far back off the road, and we want that second access, that if they don't.
In that northwest corner of
Yeah.
317,
Mm-hmm.
Cortland.
Jason, is
Because
our
I think that
ordinance
is important.
allow permanent built, like little cabins or anything like
No, because it goes back to
Saying there's another-
the language.
She's proposing, gonna propose.
Right here, Tim. The RV park, the definition right up at the front is.
Yeah. You even read that?
RVs for transient use and temporary parking, so it wouldn't allow cabins, because that would be a permanent. That would be
And I
a third
actually,
animal, that wouldn't be a manufactured home community.
that. Yeah, because
Wouldn't be an
when y'all were
RV
talking about
park.
where you stayed, or we stayed
Mhm.
once, it was an RV park, because we were going with friends who had an RV, and then there were like 5 little cabins.
and I actually like that.
I
Yeah.
did too. It was-
Well, on
it
my
was actually
motorcycle
pretty
trip,
cool.
I just, when we stayed on, we had tents, but we stayed in several cabins. If they had a cabin, we picked the cabin,
Yeah.
we were there at tents, but.
I
And
don't know
didn't have
that
my RV and my motorcycle.
our code would even allow a cabin campground type development,
Well,
unless we did it as a PD.
Well, it should. I mean, honestly.
Yeah, yeah.
It's one of those, if it doesn't, we probably ought to consider that because it's another option.
Yeah,
Those are more expensive. You know, if you go from $70 a night for the RV stand, it'd be $100 at least, 150 for the cabin. So that's probably something that consider allowing.
yeah.
And something else, if I can, just before I forget, because Jason was talking about how to apply our various road standards and, TIAs where appropriate, whatever the case may be, entrance requirements, to clarify in the code that we would treat RV parks, treat the pads essentially as dwelling units for code to say, look, on more than 150, for example, you got to have a second entrance. So that also would limit where they put them. Because they may look, they say, hey, I need to do more than 150. They're going to need to have a second entrance and probably have to have a public road, another public road
Yeah.
opportunity, because we'd also have the reserved frontage, a separate lot. So that would limit where they could put them, also address concerns about access and traffic. And so if that's something.
What you're saying is, there's a difference between allowed by code versus feasible. in specifics.
I don't know if I would say anything that complicated. I think it's just a matter of,
Conversation.
how to apply. I mean, if that's a secondary benefit of it.
Right.
But so that we can require decel, acceleration lane, requirements that would for subdivision entrance with
Right.
150 dwelling units versus 150 RV pads or cabins combinations. And so whatever our code evolves to, so that ensure they've got access, the entrances are wide enough, so it's not just a CUP thing. It's, hey, we can treat them the same, and they're not dwelling units, but in terms of safety,
Trafficability and safety.
we have an opportunity.
Egress, they're the same.
If y'all are okay with that concept, I'd like to be able to put that.
Which is,
I am.
and that's where we added that second entrance. We were already requiring them to have that second gate at the park boundary. And y'all had, I think wisely, required them to just build a temporary road that could be used in a pinch until that site develops, and then it can become.
And I think that's important. On that side, I think it's important because we see the site, we know what it is. Those ladies were right there, those catch on fire and you can't get out of the whole park.
Those ladies are
But-
absolutely right.
But on like the 317 one that's coming, if they're sitting way far back, are they gonna be able to do that? If we try to put that into our ordinance that they need that, but we're also wanting to try to get them kind of back out of sight, that's kind of fighting against each other.
The two,
Which
those
one on
two
317
requirements.
that's coming, Mike?
I think
We've got one on
wasn't I
Dairy
think
Road
this
that's coming.
Wasn't one of
There's
these.
one on Airport Road that they've talked about.
Is that
The
Lisa?
Scallion
There was the one on Dairy.
annexation.
And I may,
I think, Mike, you're
There's
talking about the one, airport.
maybe so,
Around-
yeah.
Yeah.
I think so. But But it's really not site specific.
Well, yeah, because it's
We're
right
kind
on
of-
Cloverleaf.
We're kind of fighting it, because we're saying on the one hand, we'd like them to kind of be back out the road and hidden, but then we're saying we want them to have access and egress, and those fight against each other, those two things, if we write that into our ordinance.
Yes. Well, and so they, it either has to be a big enough piece of property or wide enough where they've got, two 50-foot entrances.
Mhm.
Maybe it's 41 feet if we're matching our standards, yet step back. And so then you have some future commercial lots between those entrances. So they can
I mean, the
still,
situation that they have here
they can
is
still do
perfect
it.
for it.
Yeah.
Just some other ones may not, we want them to be way back in
Yeah.
It may not be an area that's gonna be viable for some commercial.
Well,
stuff.
and
I know
I
it
think-
for 30
Yeah,
years.
Yeah,
but the
that's okay.
safety of ingress and egress is still an issue,
It is.
whether it's viable or not. The safety for the residents of the park as well as other people on
Oh, I
using the
agree.
street.
I just think we're kind of saying, do this. They kind of fight each other, the two things.
They do, you're right.
I think that's where I was coming at with my
Yes.
complicated answer to Brian.
it limits
is that,
the locations where they can.
Like where that park doesn't make sense at this site because maybe there's 2,000 acres of corn behind them. And there's no likelihood that they're ever gonna get a connection
Yeah.
to that other back road. But maybe this one, maybe they can go across the creek and there's, whatever, Middle Road or
I'm okay with
Lavandusky, or there's some other connection that they can make besides the loop.
Or it's a
And
smaller
that site
park.
becomes feasible,
Or it's a smaller park.
or it's a smaller park.
Yeah,
Yes,
they've
yeah.
already- They've got
Yeah.
one approved entrance.
And we've worked with developers for residential subdivision in the very same way. We want to put 200 homes here. Show us how you can make that work. We can do 120 homes here. Yeah, I think you're right. They fight, but they fight to good purpose, that we know we're gonna get a good product.
Yeah, that's what you meant.
that's what's important.
We don't know if it's enclosed to it, or not, it was the fancy part, but it won't be a building.
I think we need to make sure that these are not punitive, but they need to be. Don't want a million mile fees around road. Well, anywhere in town. Susan and I talked about that the other day. I was like, just the importance of thinking about 10, 20, generational thoughts instead of just this is an okay use for now. You're going to be more intentional about the future, so.
I think, if you're not thoughtful about and intentional about the type of requirements you put on there, which I think what I've heard from the conversation, especially Jessica, from your perspective, is that you want, it's not that there's not a place for these, but you want it to be where it should be. You want them located where it makes sense for them to be located, not because it's the easiest thing to develop there. So, I can't do this development, so I'm gonna do this instead. You want it to be viable for that, not because it's not viable for something else right now. And so that you're not getting kind of premature development in a place that, just because maybe that lot or that piece of property should have been, or would have been more, I keep going back to the highest and best use, it would have been, a more traditional neighborhood environment or even an industrial area. But because that's not practical today, you just want to make sure that the standards you put in place help to encourage it being in the right place, not just that it's the easiest and the path of least resistance is, I guess, what I'm trying to say.
So
Yes.
I was just gonna say that, and Brian, we hadn't talked about this, but Kelly, you had mentioned, 2025, starting a 5-year update to the future land use plan. What we could do as part of that land use plan is update, is an RV park appropriate in urban residential downtown core? Employment mixed use? Maybe. Urban estate? ag. You know, where in those future land use designations is an RV park appropriate? And to go back to, these are all conditional use permits. So there's still the subjective authority to go. That's all well and good, but this is not the project for this property at this time. And we're gonna vote no under CUP.
And one other consideration, Jason, I don't know if it made it into a bullet point, but we talked about requirement to connect to city infrastructure, water and sewer. So right now, I think we have like 1,000 feet.
She's like a mile of water line.
Anyways, it's pretty
From-
long.
Yeah.
But maybe shortening that distance. So if they're closer to city infrastructure where it's more viable for a, more appropriate land use that could afford to do that connection, it might make sense that we're pushing towards that as opposed to, we're kind of backing ourselves into a corner by allowing such a long distance.
I absolutely get where you're coming from. I'll echo what Lena said to me in public. I'm not saying I agree with this, but from the applicants. They're gonna build something like 8,000 feet of pipe from Hector Garcia under the loop all the way up. That has the potential to unlock those other properties that can now tie into city water. Is that something that we want to, and they'll, more than likely, they're gonna ask for a cost share. I know Lena, she's gonna ask for the money. But does that warrant that, us supporting them with that cost share because it opens up future properties for development? And like I said, I don't know that I have an opinion one way or the other, but I'll put the question to the group.
But this,
That feels like two separate things if you're saying that to me, just my opinion, if you're saying it's a benefit because this development could open up additional development, so you might consider allowing that development so that additional development can occur. But if you're gonna pay for it anyways, you can pay for it for the highest and best use. So to me, those are two
Sure.
separate, if you're gonna, if we're talking about a cost share, then that's evaluated on its merits and not on
Right.
land use.
but this particular property, is this the highest and best use for this property? Even today, I mean, I question that in this location.
Sure.
I very much question it. Whether it opens up other development or not is just as well in addition to what Brent is saying.
I mean, especially if we're gonna pay for it.
Well, but exactly.
Yeah, depends on how much of the share there is.
So, I mean, are you saying that this is gonna come to us and then they're gonna ask for us to cost share?
Yes.
She, they, somebody?
They're gonna
That is
ask,
what he's saying.
I'm saying they haven't, but they're more likely to ask for cost share to get the water to the RV park. This was just a concept of what other developments could be. It's not guaranteed that those are coming to you.
Right, no, I understand, but
But
they, somebody will be asking us after.
in this
after
case,
we
development
approve
engineering,
it.
but it could be, I think I'm trying to keep it at,
Yes,
higher
yes.
level, not to be so specific.
No, I understand, but
Yes, that
after
is a
this is
possibility.
approved, or pardon?
Yes, that is
It's
a possibility.
After it's approved?
But we can say no and. they
Because
can-
all those
So it's
would
approved
require
and then-
rezoning.
And then we say no to.
Well, you approve it,
This is kind of the horse.
Not really, if
you
they,
approve it,
Something
and then
before sunset.
if you were to approve it, it doesn't obligate you
No,
for.
no, I understand that, but
we either cost share or we don't, and then they either pay for it all or they don't.
They don't.
Project never
Yeah. And all the other uses around it, they're gonna require at least rezoning, if not conditional use permit or plan development as well. So that's,
at some point you will remind us of this because I have a memory of a slug and I won't remember it.
And
what's your name again?
it's also
Yeah,
important,
exactly.
it's also important to remember that zoning decisions run with the land. So again, I know it's easy to say, well, this person is gonna do it right or what, but
Right.
you don't have any idea that they could come up with, I'm not saying that they are misleading you.
Right, no, I understand.
Although they could, some people have done that
course.
before, but
Yes.
you can come up with the intention of, I'm gonna develop this, but you do have to make land use decisions based on, you cannot make them on the person who's coming up to you and
Right.
saying, I'm gonna do this right, or I'm gonna do this. If you don't codify it, and you say yes, then they can turn around and sell it to the next person.
Right.
And so you shouldn't take, anything that's, not binding as,
For granted.
yeah,
Or
as,
believe it.
as part of of your consideration of why you would approve something or not approve it, or I guess approve something.
In some ways, what you just said is exactly why we've been here since 1 o'clock talking about this.
Except this one specifically is a CUP. That CUP condition can,
This one,
yes, that can tie, you can tie that CUP to that project, that owner. So that you can't do that for regular
no,
zoning,
right,
but you can do it for a CUP.
You can, but you have to.
Yes.
right, I understand, I think.
So if you approved it without tying it to someone, it doesn't automatically
That's
get
right.
tied to
That's right.
someone.
But that someone can still sell it.
But
Oh, but they
And then
can't
there's
sell the
CUP.
CUP.
If you put that as
Or
a
no.
condition.
We just have to make sure our CUP covers what we
And-
need to see.
And
Well,
and
and
the
the CUP is
CUP
gonna
is part
bind
of
them
the
to the
sale.
site
It's
plan
a,
too. So if it was sold, and that's what they've submitted. So if you approve the CUP and you decide we're not gonna cost share the water line, and that kills the project, Belton Engineering and whoever the applicant is, the client, they can walk away and sell it. Next person comes in and say, I've got the resources and I'm gonna build that. If they were in line with that site plan and the conditions, y'all submit permits. Well, they'd have to go through subdivision, they gotta go through building plan.
wait, is
But
that this?
That
Yeah, are
is
these the same?
this.
Yeah,
just
okay,
this,
exactly, just
not
this,
this.
that's what I thought, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
But if it was sold, like Brent said, the ordinance runs with the land. Someone else could come in, they would have to follow that ordinance and that CUP. If they wanted to do something different that wasn't already allowed in the ag, they'd have to come back to y'all to revise the conditions, revise the site plan, or change the use completely.
But you do have to be careful. I might just be feeling grumpy today. You do have to be careful about someone coming up to you and saying, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that, and not actually codifying it in a condition, because that means absolutely nothing.
Right,
Which is like, that's the reason that I wanted to see the second exit and I put it in there. I'm
That's
not,
in there.
I'm not just saying, hey, y'all told me you're gonna do it. I wanted it in there.
but
It's on the ordinance as a condition.
this discussion of cost sharing, I think blew me out of the water.
Yeah,
But that's a whole different issue.
Well, it's a whole different issue, but it's secondary to this. I understand. We
I know.
approve it, then the thing fails because we don't cost share.
But
If
if,
something is in the wrong order.
those get evaluated very, very heavily, by finance and city manager's office, legal, to evaluate the cost benefit.
Right, no, I
Probably,
understand
so,
all of that, but
but if we don't, then either they build it or somebody else builds it, or it doesn't get built at all, and they come back later on and want a different zoning, or it doesn't mean that.
but it kind of ties the hands of the land in the meantime. If land had hands, it would be tied because they're trying to get, potentially, possibly, trying to get the cost share.
I personally don't have a problem with the request coming in after the zoning. As long as you're not making a case for the zoning saying, I'm gonna open up land to be developed and then turn around and say, oh, but you're gonna pay for it, city. Then you're not opening up anything. We're opening it up
Yeah.
and we can make it whatever we want it. That is what I took issue with, is to say that, and I'm not saying Jason said that, but if
If it were.
if you're trying to say you should approve this zoning because I am then gonna open up other land for development, but oh, by the way, I'm gonna ask you to pay for that infrastructure, that is not the same thing as saying,
Yeah.
I'm gonna open up land for development on my dime so that other areas can develop. If you're saying this thing is gonna open up more land for development, but I'm asking you to pay for that thing that opens up development, that's not a reason you would consider, that's not a check mark in the pros of weighing, in my mind. Of
But I'm
weighing the,
still saying, if it's gonna open up the land for development, what will the development be if you have whatever, or an RV park in front of it? Right back to
yes.
3 weeks ago.
right?
And that's my concern too.
Yes, exactly.
To me, it's two separate things. We let them do this, or we don't let them do this, but if we do vote to let them do this, and they come back and we don't want to cost share, so that kills it, then it kills it.
I'm not talking about cost sharing. I'm saying, let's say they pay for the whole thing. And we've opened, and they say at the same time, we're paying for it, and aren't we great, because we're gonna open, because our work is going to open up this land for development. I'm saying, by doing this, we are potentially limiting what kind of development may occur back here,
You can talk
because
about
it's an RV park.
on the other side of the creek over there.
Yeah,
Commercial is not gonna typically be limited by an RV park.
well, is this
If
gonna be
if the
commercial?
came first or whatever, but
Okay,
if the commercial came first, that might
oh, well, that's
might limit
definitely
the
gonna limit.
RV park coming behind it.
Right.
Vice versa, commercial, when they have frontage and they have the visibility, they're not really gonna care that there's an RV
I
park.
couldn't
behind it.
agree with you more, commercial, absolutely.
Across the creek, from what I've seen, I hadn't driven all down it, but there's a cliff and stuff.
So
If
it's,
if it wanted to be single family estates on the other side, I don't think, to me, I mean, that's just me.
Because of the
Because
creek and the cliff.
It's not backing, I wouldn't want a single family residential and then there's a fence and then there's an RV park, but there's a.
Because of the creek and the cliff, you're saying single family would not be,
In my mind, I would develop single family developer, yes.
well, you've been
even if
talking
there's
to do it.
RV park. But that's just in my mind, that's.
Yeah,
I don't think it's necessarily limiting or not limiting. the
well,
property.
obviously, everything that develops limits or does not limit what's coming around it. Anything, RV park or, a state size lot.
What do you think?
After seeing this, I don't know. I mean, RV storage front. Or,
Just in the RV storage part of the park, right on the loop.
Just to be clear, that is not
That's
part of the
just-
ordinance.
That's just a possibility.
Possibility to
It's
show
a
that
theoretical, possibility.
when, at the last workshop, y'all were talking about the visibility of the park from the highway. The engineers making the case that once development comes in, whatever is developed on the frontage, you're not going to see the park because it's going to be behind whatever comes in. I asked Lena then, show us what you think you might put there, then council can consider that. So this is not part of the ordinance, but to your question, it's possibly what approving that would enable. So it's not authorizing it, but it's enabling.
That's the purpose.
And maybe that's being semantic and
And she's not
nuanced,
saying
but
she's gonna do it, or she has anybody
the
to
only
do it, or
Yeah.
or somebody has spoken with her about doing it, it's just a possibility.
yeah, that's
It's
just.
the kind of thing that might happen.
It wouldn't hurt to tell her, hey, if you're wanting to do this RV park, just know that there, you get a gut feel the council would be opposed to some of these uses later on, just so they know if this won't work without them doing that, then they may pull it. Because you probably won't get RV storage. This is information.
RV storage is not.
And keep in mind, that's not what I was suggesting, with the 300-foot
Right.
minimum. Not for future RV storage, but for something that,
Right, no, I
for a
understand.
use that is not dependent on having an RV park.
Right.
Otherwise, develops because of other homes and services coming to the area, not because of the RV park.
But I mean, whatever other, and this is the situation, and I think what Ralph's like, if there were other uses up front that were not a single family residential backing up to the RV park, then I think that gets the RV park behind, and if we're talking about having it where they have to tee off the main road, that gets it hidden by whatever's there. But in this instance, on the backside, to me, because of the separation with the creek and stuff, makes it not as,
You go above.
yeah, you have a
Yeah,
buffer.
you're right.
Whatever, that's very specific to this, but having on our, if we're redoing our ordinance and we're saying we want to keep it back off the main roads, then we do that, and then as things come in, people want to do other stuff in the front, and that's, they look at that individually. We don't want RV storage, but we want something there.
And it wouldn't be the first time that Dalton Gear brought us a couple of different projects shot down before they finally found their yes. Pattern there.
Troy or Dalton. Fine place to put it,
How about a liquor store?
right? Make it hard.
Yeah, another car wash.
We can call Deerfield residents to ask them if that car washes.
What's the density for?
That one, 4.8. 30.9 acres,
7 units per acre
4.85
is the
spaces
max,
per acre.
right?
Yeah, they
How
can't be
many
over 7.
acres, is over at Bel Air? Do you know? Just to get an idea of how many, RVs are out there. Because it looks like a sea of them.
You wanna say they're at 300 right now?
I don't, I wouldn't,
I don't know.
I venture a guess. It's gonna be all of it.
Here, we're not a destination.
I don't think, I don't,
Contract.
But
yeah, I don't think it's, I don't think. Maybe.
it's not gonna last forever.
For this road.
It's at or over 200, I think.
Are you going to?
That have that property be productive.
Well, they have about 26
25
acres.
acres. That's, 20.
So I don't think
That's it.
stay in RV park. It's more of like a holding.
Yeah.
You make some money.
Get paid for next.
Which is really genius.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like an investment, like any other investment. Let somebody else pay for it, and
Right.
you can sell it and get your equity.
Like I just said about zoning, like that may have been his intention 10 years ago, maybe doing so well that he would never stop, doing it. And so it's not, there's no guarantee that it would ever not be a part of it, at least initially.
Their money makers, I've got several friends with. They make more money with their RV parks than I make with my townhomes and such.
Bel Air is 26 acres, and so it's 7 units per acre. There are no more than 182 units there.
And how many?
Is that both phases? Just phase one.
I think, Kelly, that's both phases.
Yeah.
I know for any of them, for RV parks period, it's some, I think they're okay, some of us don't. This particular one, if I were being picky, I think it's a good location for it myself, but that's some people don't want them there anywhere at all, and
Sure, that is a good
that's 4 or
location.
5 individuals.
Yeah, and
I think if it's gone, I think for somebody like me who is okay with RV parks, this is a location for it.
it's hidden from the highway and it's got the buffer of the creek behind it. And,
My only thought is what we've talked about before is those big trailers slowing down on the loop, even to make that turn. And so how far is that property off the loop?
What, this one?
It's a little bit.
800 feet.
Is that all?
Oh, you meant the loop.
Talk about front.
Yeah, the loop, right.
Yeah, from. Here's the loops here, there's their entrance, it's about 800 feet.
There's not, I mean,
Well,
that's a fairly, that's a 60-mile-an-hour road.
Which means it's 75 miles an
Didn't
hour.
we
No,
put a
it's-
condition on?
No, it's not either.
Not
They will
good.
get you. I've got 3 tickets on that road.
Shame.
That's a 60-mile-an-hour road, Jim Davis.
I got
Pick
it.
you too if he's feeling handy.
You didn't tell him you're the mayor. Just got out of it.
That does not help. Probably makes it. Oh, yeah?
You know better.
Yeah.
To that
Well, I'm-
point,
Finish your
I'm
bird
with the
chicken.
state of Texas, Mr. Mayor boy.
and y'all talked about this at the first reading, we talked about turn lanes.
Yes.
Now, I'm not an engineer, just I've studied this a lot. Absolutely, needs a turn lane and the decel lanes, both the acceleration going out, and the deceleration. And TxDOT has made that happen with other residential developments there. County View got theirs, they just flared it out, so it's possible, y'all can make that a requirement. If TxDOT wants to say, no, we don't want to let them do it, then let TxDOT do that. But I think,
And
What are you talking about?
I'm talking
Turn
about
lane?
the center turn lane and the acceleration, because
You did put that as a condition on
Yeah.
first reading,
Yeah.
that you would require
Yeah.
turn lane unless, or a decel and a cell lane,
Unless they said-
unless TxDOT didn't
Mhm.
allow it, and then would waive that requirement. So if you adopt the same thing on second reading that you passed on first reading,
it's there.
this would have a decel lane unless for some odd reason that I don't think would happen, TxDOT said, no, you can't
Well,
do
what
that.
if TxDOT says, sure, we should have that, it should occur, we'll pay for it in 10 years?
No, they have to
They'll-
put it in
the
before they
developer
can
will
develop
require
it.
Oh, okay.
TxDOT would require that, but you also put that
Right,
as a
right, right.
condition.
And then TxDOT,
Considered it on first
if
reading.
TxDOT reimburses them for it at some point,
No,
no.
they just, just.
Period,
recorded
it's not
through their part.
TxDOT paid everyone, they paid for it.
Right.
Right.
They, okay, got it.
Yeah.
What were all the,
That's
we
not a
put that
simple
condition
traffic
and then the next condition, or any other conditions we had on there above what they
It's
originally brought?
Yeah, the exit,
What?
the emergency.
It probably would
route.
involve.
So you added that and then.
But that's a normal, that's very standard of TxDOT access, is that if that they make you do a traffic impact analysis, if it shows you need improvements to their facilities in order to support the traffic that your development is gonna generate, then you are responsible for making the improvements, subject to TxDOT's requirements, and you pay for it. There is no reimbursement. The reason it's having to be done is because your development is causing the impact, so you have to pay for it.
What
Otherwise,
if
they don't get
TxDOT says, where's that other picture? What if TxDOT says, for instance, we don't think that this is gonna require, your development is gonna require the, decel and XL lanes, or whatever, however you say it. And so they get to build without putting those in, but these things come in and they then they then, whatever this turns out to be, increases the traffic. What happens then?
Well, in this particular case, if you adopted it in the same way that you adopted it on first reading, even if TxDOT said you don't have to do it, as long as they don't say you can't do it, then you were requiring it. You were saying you have to put in
Okay.
a deceleration
Okay.
facility. In general, though, it absent that condition, then whatever development triggers the need for them would pay for it. But for this particular instance, if you keep the same condition in place that we put on there on the first reading, the only way in which there wouldn't be a decel lane built is if TxDOT said, we are not allowing you
What, which
to
they're not.
install a deceleration facility on our road. And that is very unlikely
Yeah.
to happen.
But my only analogy here is that one thing after another got built on 93 with everybody saying, oh, we're gonna need something someday, somehow.
Right, it didn't consider the cumulative.
It's the cumulative effect on 93. And now some things are going to happen, but there have been things that have been built that prohibit enough happening in terms of traffic control.
TxDOT has changed their traffic models since the woes of 93 or say 620 and Round Rock or even what's gone on Adams here. Their design guidelines have changed in a way that makes a more proactive approach to cumulative effect rather than
Future cumulative
Right.
effect. Okay.
right, rather than trying to put it off. They may say that could get deferred until a point where the traffic actually exists. But if the traffic exists, then the improvement has to be done before traffic exists. So it could be that one of those developments is the tipping point.
Right.
But if you had adopted the way you did on first reading, that your requirement to install now, then it would take precedence
Okay.
over the deferred.
In this case, where on that color coded bubble, you know, they're adding that entrance road. That'll be built, so.
Right.
Community collector standard. When those other properties on the fringe come in for zoning, they may ask for straight zoning. We can recommend it, or y'all can require it to change it to a plan development, add a condition that there's some access management policies. We've got recommendation mobility plan for stuff in the neighborhood plans. That says they can only have a certain number of
I was gonna say,
entrances.
or better
On
yet,
precinct
we could just
three.
put it in the.
Or better yet, project manager of the UDC.
Getting there.
Let's fix the
Getting there.
Okay. Yeah,
That access management could be applied there to prevent the traffic nightmare on the loop itself.
Right. And we'll do that through the UDC.
I think that's what I'm being told.
And in the interim, if it comes out through a plan development,
it's gonna be a lot
hopefully not too much longer.
of rezoning.
The three things in front.
Yeah, I mean, I would guess, because that's not part of the rezoning.
No, I know.
It'll be a while before those are viable. UDC will be fixed by then. But if otherwise, you can still do it.
What's the distance from approximately from Bel Air to? This part.
How many?
I'd have to look on that.
So we were talking about what the distance would be before you can have another RV park. Because if we put this in here, we should not have that there. Whatever. Because I know if someone else wants to do it on.
Thanks for your input.
If we
I
have that
appreciate you.
precedent now, how far?
No, the same thing we were talking about the
Exactly.
mobile homes.
Exactly. And then with the cap, say they can't come by this property here and make it another thing. What's the cap of what that development? The same naming developments. Maybe not even the same naming, but.
Is there an overall maximum?
Maximum.
That's a good point, yeah.
Cause I'm just looking at these and it's just, there's no break in
Yeah,
between.
I know.
There's no break in between.
And that
What is
was,
the green space requirement?
yeah,
Is this part of the green space and it shouldn't be?
no, that's, flood area.
Floodplain very much in there. Set there. Yeah,
Is that in the green space? Are they doing this?
and then you've got space in there.
It is these inserted in between.
Are you figuring out the distance?
Yeah, it kind of reminds me.
Trying to figure, get out where we're at.
Sunbury Road. Because it's
I had-
kind of a buddy.
I hadn't done this one yet.
11 Dusty.
You could.
Enter PRC school.
We don't have it in the code for them to break up these paths. When, I mean,
I've only.
most of these are around 7 or 8. These were like 16 in a row. Gather was around 10 in a row. I think really hit like a street.
As the
So
truck
that
line is.
may be something we could Could add to future members.
Crow flies is about 2.5 miles.
That's what I was
If you go around the loop, it's further than that, 'cause that's straight across.
It's gonna be closer to 4 miles or 5 miles around the loop.
I can calculate that too.
Long as though, I think that, is a lot of fun.
What does that mean? Are you against or?
I mean, I don't like it. It's
I
just,
don't need.
so,
I'm actually not, I just,
yeah, but I think that's too many in one spot. Everybody, if you're gonna have one, but I think that location is not a bad location.
But more lesser size.
Moving forward, I would like.
We're really concerned about the
2
three,
3/4 miles by the way around.
how many?
2 3/4 miles around the loop
Oh,
driving
so not that, it's very close.
from the entrance of the
Yeah,
Bel Air
Bel Air.
to this one approximately, just driving.
So by allowing this, we're already backing ourselves into distance requirement between,
No, I wouldn't think so, unless we put that, we make that a stipulation, right? We could go forward after this. and say, Right?
oh,
We could put a cap. Is
After,
that what you're saying? Like each RV park is limited to instead of number?
and distance between.
And
this distance between RV parks.
Right. You're talking about a cap
I
on
was
the
talking
number of
about
pads.
two, yeah, so
Yeah.
we were kind of going back and forth.
But if we accept this one,
which makes
It's
sense.
2
if you're
3/4
concerned
miles
about
from Bel Air.
concentration, You wouldn't just
by Mike's
have a
calculation,
distance, you would have an overall
are we backing
You could just have
ourselves
one.
into not being able to?
never ending.
Right.
And I am, I'm both instances, I'm concerned about conservation. I stay in them all the time. I like RV parks as a general rule.
But I would think it'd be
Place, but I'm
more
concerned about
Set in the
conservation.
distance.
be
You know, if these are.
Somewhere by the
2 3/4,
lake
And you
or-
say that the right distance is 1 mile.
around some type of.
No, I'm
You know,
saying, what if we say right 5 miles, just to pick a
Yeah.
number?
Right, that's what I'm
Are
saying.
we backed into not being able to do that?
I think so, but
I mean, I
I
don't know.
defer to
The
the
things
lawyer.
that blow you there.
If these,
Hospital.
if this one is 2 3/4 from Bel Air and council decides
I think it's supposed to be bought.
6 months from now that the right distance for that
We did not do it well. We're so scared.
is 5 miles.
And I've been there. I spent.
Would we be prohibited from making that 5 mile
We
distance?
stayed at
when
one.
we approve this?
On a work, I'm fixing it down here. Right by the dog park. I just said no dogs allowed.
Hey, Kyle, I need
To consider.
I need to hear too.
The ordinance change, so that's a change right there that would allow us to actually. Plus, the way we talked about it with the consideration, not an absolute,
Okay,
so.
I don't wanna get backed into being unable.
There's a draw for me. College Station, we see that more with.
That's what happened. You know, like everywhere. But we have 2 hospitals. Construction track, new construction.
So what about crossroads with their games and their tournaments? Do we go with the-
They are able to park in the tennis court area and,
So
I don't
they.
see that
Auto-
many
I-
of them over there.
Who?
Yeah.
They do, right there, there's some
And then
blood.
where the
going
tennis
on.
court-
Six spaces
Oh,
at
oh,
Crossroads, I think, 6 or so spaces at Crossroads and a few similar number at Mainland. So we do have some RV accommodations for, you know, some of our event facilities.
Not a place to dump those there.
You can go to, that go on the corner of Airport and, Powder, if you, that would be the closest to Crossroads that I'm aware of. But no, there's no stores.
Okay. Are we ready to move on?
I think it's important
No.
that Kyle confirmed that we're not backing, I believe, we're not backing ourselves in. And by Mike's calculations, if this were approved, it's 2.75 miles from Bel Air. And Kyle is saying we are not backing ourselves into being able, following this, if we were to approve it, to put a distance greater than that limitation between
Like
parks.
setting a precedent.
So
Thank you, setting precedent.
can I just,
Okay.
can I mention something just for consideration on that? That, you know, Bren brought the idea of that as criteria, as opposed to establishing a hard distance at this point. Because something that you're also going to see, presumably, there's, you know, one of the other RV parks over, you know, over by the lake.
That are gonna come to us?
Yes, presumably, you know, that's not a zoning case yet, or is it?
No, that, just annexation.
The other one.
Just potential.
So, but just something to consider up there, you know, you've got, you've got all the Corps of Engineers RV
Right.
parks.
And isn't.
And so, you know, I don't know, at this point, rather than have an arbitrary distance, and I guess you're trying to avoid that, having
Oh.
arbitrary distance, but criteria for consideration so that, you know, if you think that's an ideal location for an RV park, back up to the lake, well, you know what? Yes, there are RV parks all over the lake. They're not, you know, they're Corps of Engineers property. They're not city of Temple, city limits, but they're gonna be within that distance. So anyway, just
It would just allow, it would
Criteria.
allow it to be a consideration
Yes.
consideration.
versus a,
A
hard and fast.
hardcore rule.
The only thing that you would consider,
Right.
because, you know, topography,
Right.
land uses, there may be other things, maybe it's just a belief. You feel like for whatever reason, that particular spot is a great spot, you know, for reasons we couldn't even come up with today.
Right, sure.
And it gives but I think if you put it, and that was Jason's idea, by the way.
Yeah.
If, it would give, I didn't want to take credit for the good idea. I think it would codify, you know, like it would show in writing that you're gonna consider that, so it's not just on a whim. Yes, it gives anyone the notice that you are concerned about, you know, concentration of these, developments. But it still gives you some of the discretion and the flexibility to consider so you can take it in its totality
Right.
instead of just no go of that one thing. I think that, you know, maybe, be a better approach than
Yes,
just, you know,
flexibility is
absolutely, you know, a certain distance. And then was there a certain number, that y'all were leaning towards in terms of a total maximum for a single contiguous development?
What been there right now?
Bel Air's
We're around
182
With both phases?
with both phases, you know, and what they're proposing, the one that's will be on council agenda for second reading is 150.
Yes.
So you already have the per acre, you know, maximum, but given, do you want to have an overall maximum regardless of how much acreage is involved, or does
No,
that?
pads.
Before, to
See
add
that?
that, we were talking about earlier about the emergency egress and the traffic. We want to set an upper limit on the number of pad sites, or if we require those additional entrances, same as we do for any subdivision, that they gotta have 75, or if they're going over that 150 or 300, they have to have the enhanced entrances. Like we talked about the Trojan rezone, some of the other big planned developments, that if we are gonna apply the subdivision entry standards, that may end up putting in the cap on the number of RV pad sites by default without just saying the words.
think that's a
We're
great
going to
idea.
get there without having to decide, well, what's the arbitrary RV pad limit? We've got that. It's called the subdivision entry code, 150, 100.
Well, yeah,
I like that.
to me, some of this is backflow preventer all over again. And if we are, in some ways, I own an RV, Grant owns an RV. We own RVs. We don't know what it takes to run an RV business. And now we're talking about, setting community standards, right? Home standards around ingress and egress and setbacks and all kinds of stuff like that. And then we're talking about $72 a day, right? That's not enough. We don't know how to run an RV business.
What's that
So-
got to do with it?
What?
What does that have to do with it?
The
Whether
fact
we know how
that
to
us
run
five
the
clowns are making a decision about businesses we don't understand.
Us clowns make decisions about business in reference, we don't run the business. We say we want XYZ kind of a business in XYZ location.
And you either set the stand without enough knowledge. You
I
set the
disagree.
standards either too low and you get a proliferation of them because now it's easy. Or you set the standards too high and you get zero of them. We have a guy sitting right over there that knows how to run a, land lease community because he's done it. And this is his third or fourth one. And we use some of his advice on what to do. And he's left and we're all sitting here talking about things that we don't know anything about.
What's your suggestion?
My suggestion is we slow down, setting hard and fast things around this. I am fine with spreading them out. I have no problem with that. And I'm fine with setting a number that makes sense possibly whenever we know more information about what it takes to run an RV park. Right? No one tells you, I mean, you are allowed to figure out without a bunch of rules set around you what it takes to run a lumberyard. Right?
Yeah, but we don't let her put the lumberyard anywhere she wants to put it.
That's not what I'm talking about.
I think the concern.
What I'm talking about is us putting these kind of limits over something that, that we don't know enough about to know if we are allowing an entrepreneur to come in. We can set standards, right? With distance, we can set standards with pavement, we can set standards around a lot of those things. But ultimately, I don't think we need to try to set standards around how many, what's the max you can have. Because every time that you pour, we all have talked about what it takes to build a road, right? It's millions of dollars a mile.
Right.
So if we require someone to put a loop through the, either an asphalt or a concrete loop, probably asphalt, but either way, that's another cost.
Sure.
And so I think we just need to be aware of that before we just set arbitrary requirements. And we take some time and ask, we got Mike Beavers, we have these people, they've got to have pro formas. And I just don't think it's fair for us to sit here and just make these arbitrary rules, but end up getting codified in someone that, and we even have a need for it, right? And somebody else up said, even at this, I can't make money at that. Because at some point, that person that's in an RV is gonna look at that and say, that doesn't make any sense anymore. I'll go do something else, right? I'll go rent a place from the mayor. I will go do something else other than live in this RV park.
No, they're gonna say, I'll do something other than build an RV park, not that I will rent from the mayor or from Peter
That's
Mayor.
what I'm
That's what we're
saying.
saying.
That's
to
exactly
make it
what
a
I'm
little more
saying.
difficult so that you don't have the bad actors show up.
Right.
You get someone who's serious
all.
that wants to run.
Right.
We might be
Right.
saying the same thing, Tim, but I'm not quite sure we are.
I
I
don't
was
think
just-
we were.
I was just asking, we've talked about, I guess one of the primary concerns that I heard is that we're wanting to make sure that there's not an unreasonable concentration of RV parks. And I think Zoe brought up a good point, is we've talked about distance between them, but is there not, and this is my question, is there kind of a number that in your mind would be too big for a single park? Because theoretically, if you said, we're gonna, really look hard at and really evaluate whether anything within 5 miles of each other is the right thing, but then you just let one park just build and build until it's got 1,000, 2,000, I'm just making something up. Is there an upper limit on what density for a single park makes sense in the same way that there's a limit between how closely you want individual parks to be to each other.
Yes, and I don't think we can set that without knowing more about, I promise you, Mike Beaver knows what his revenue is per pad per day, probably per season, maybe even per month, right? That information's out there.
Well, in addition, it's also to a degree dependent upon the size of the piece of land we're talking about.
Well, so I
You
found
do
out
have
about
a limit on the size of the land, right? So set right now, if we change nothing, then you have a maximum of 7 RVs per acre.
No, the size of the total land, maybe a developer comes in with 2,000 acres versus a developer with 50 acres.
Right, and my question is there a certain maximum acreage that you feel like would be appropriate for a single contiguous RV park development?
So seven per acre times 50 acres, a max of 350 units. That's what you're saying. Is there a number for that?
Do you care?
Right.
Do you care?
Right.
Not, we already have a standard in place related to how dense how many you can put per acre. We've talked about having at least a consideration of how closely they can develop together. And I think your third leg of that stool then is, and it doesn't matter, I'm not saying there's a right or wrong answer, I'm asking, does it matter to you how large a single RV development could get before it's too big?
If we go there, I would say that would be more a number of, because I'd rather see
For what?
a number of units allowed or spaces allowed, because I'd rather see 100 units on 20 acres than I'd rather see them less dense. I would want to say you can only do 10-acre ones and you can do 7 per acre, so you get to have 700. I would rather see the quantity.
That encourages the preservation of open space.
Exactly.
for-
Yes,
as amenities for campers.
I
And the
agree.
Gather one, I think.
But that also, the guy whoever puts a ton of money into it and you're preserving open space,
Yeah.
that space is not rented.
But I don't want to discourage them to have one that is more open space, which we would do if we said, you may only have one that's 7 acres. If they're trying to maximize their profit, they're gonna cram them in there. I'd rather, if we're trying to not have too many of them, I'd rather do the opposite.
And you, right? If that's what you like, you may be willing to pay up to $90 a night for a space. Right? And, Joe or some family that has we're able to afford a small RV to go out and spend time with the kids, right? They may be more concerned about saving money and they don't mind being crammed in there. My point to all of that is there's a balance.
Yes.
And instead of us trying to figure that balance, let's talk to somebody that knows about the balance.
But
Yeah.
I would like for us to get off high center for Lena so that she can either move forward or step away
Fair
from
enough.
her project.
Right? Yeah. And that's why we're here today instead of doing this in a workshop.
Exactly.
Right.
I understand that.
I agree.
But I don't want us to go back and get more information and put her on hold
No,
for another month.
I agree.
Lena is the hired
She's the
engineer
engineer.
for this. She's
Correct.
not the owner or the developer herself.
But we've
Yes.
put this off.
No, I agree. I agree.
And the thing is,
And
we've come up
yanked
with
the
this
rug out from
decision
under
for
her.
him to be able
Yes.
Yeah, I can see where it's going.
We yanked the rug out from both of them in a sense, in the beginning. And we need to offer,
Which is that's what I said the other day, whether it may be 3-2 for or 3-2 against, I think I would like to have her vote on, tell her move forward or.
You take the other, yeah.
Right.
yeah, you're right. I agree with you.
Brian, or what was the density that Lena's project proposing?
4.9.
Right up by 75 per
Did we
acre.
have some floodplain? Does that come out in the creek or like the so usually
Maybe that'd be good for you.
I don't know what the answer is, but I'm done. With no answer. It's not saying.
So it's 20-something acres.
29.06.
So Mike, just looking at that, how much that's floodplain, yes.
That's what I'm trying to, I don't know if that's just the park or if that's all of this whole area, to be honest
Wouldn't
with
it be
you.
just her, what she's
I
representing,
think so,
not the theoretical possibles in the front?
yeah. I think that's just the RV park. It doesn't get into.
Yeah.
That covers the septic area and stuff, detention pond.
Yeah.
Is that right? Yes. Look. And this counts as open area, even though it's septic and.
Yeah.
All that, so, and they had how many spots?
They've got 150, density is 4.85.
Okay. So, he had it.
Yeah, I just didn't.
Okay.
Yeah, but that's across the whole property, floodplain and everything.
No,
Yeah, it's not
not the road.
it's not the frontage
Not
part,
the
but
theoretical
it's
front.
it's the RV area in the back.
But it's not counting the floodplain. It's
No.
covering this, it's covering where they're putting their
Right.
Pad
stuff,
sites.
but they have more space in
Yeah,
this floodplain.
their
It's
open
not being
space, the
counted.
drainage area, the two septic open space areas, the drainage, and then the park itself.
But there's floodplain behind it back here. It's not.
But that's not the 29 acres.
Hey, Jason.
It could, yeah.
What's the potential cost share?
And it would make the density go down.
To do what?
Their cost share.
For the water,
If they come
The
to
water
us,
supply.
they'll bring the water supply, but they'll bring it in.
They'll extend city water.
But they're about as
But
dense
then
as they can get in the.
potentially ask us to share.
All right, so on that one,
Not.
where do we stand?
Right.
Yeah.
And,
Sewer would be too
Yes.
expensive.
and when.
Where are you on that one?
No, not.
I mean, I don't love it.
Military name.
Oh, Valley Trails.
Thank you, Valerie.
We have to have it.
We,
The best
there was
spot,
huge
Far enough
uproar
off the road.
within the city.
which is my main.
Us.
Yeah.
Allowing more sections to come into the city.
But I.
Why are we talking about septic?
Where the top residents.
I'm not gonna raise, I'm not gonna raise. Roll. Over and over. Is this one or just?
We asked. Sorry,
No.
that development, I think we need to take a closer look at whether
Okay.
their open space actually meets the requirements, because it's supposed to be recreational area. Septic,
I guess I'm just-
septic area can be a recreational area, but it may not. Floodplain, unless you're doing tubing,
If somebody.
you may, you know, there, so I
Somebody came in.
think we need to make sure that they're still
Back and
meeting.
said, I'm gonna put.
Yeah.
Y'all did your homework,
Yeah.
to double check.
I'm gonna fill all of this out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Are you?
Brian, remember when Valley Trails was under construction, under
That's
discussion
my
before it was
question. There, upper
approved?
limit on how many.
Allowing more septic. in the city.
Yeah, I think we should.
Why are we doing,
No, it's not that I don't.
This
It's
is,
not, I don't want to see
want
those houses,
what?
but I
Why do you
also,
want not one?
I'm just,
this,
for
this
this
one thing, it's not, this is not an instance of
No, I
that may
get
not
that.
make
I
the
get
number.
that.
a bunch of houses are gonna, with septic tanks are gonna come
I've got a
back
buddy
30
that
years
has
from now and say, hey, I live in the city.
I call him about
Sewer.
a place I live out on the lake.
City's gonna do a $30 million pay me to come put a sewer in there later. Sorry, first.
Not saying that, I'll do what you want to manage it
But you
yourself.
still have to have septic
Just that
connection.
size.
Connection. Yeah, don't you?
That's a connection, but I don't want to
In
be.
there, like I said.
It's what septic tank, but not
Yeah,
much.
yeah.
Only-
That's all.
I'm just trying to.
Maintenance for. Okay, so it's a.
You went to
total
nine.
issue.
That's my issue, I've never liked everything you're saying on that.
Yeah.
I mean, I would think it's there.
That's what I'm concerned
Shelter behind the
about.
berm.
I can serve other trails.
But that guy still needs to do all this.
They won't be around probably, but one of these days, people.
Somebody will.
No, I don't think.
I've done millions of dollars. It's great.
Sure.
I've done millions of dollars. worth of
Bel Air.
septic tank elimination program.
Right.
Exactly. They built the septic on all the houses.
You know, at some point, when all this.
They start failing.
Right.
All Meadowville, all that stuff is built. What happens?
Here by your paint.
A
little bit, yeah, 100 on you. It's okay. You're stuck. Just oscillated, yeah.
For expansion.
Some days I can't.
You have a new living room.
Yeah, right. I'm always in here
They
first.
never.
And you're over there like bumping it down.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is one RV park with one septic.
Okay.
They know what they're getting.
Yeah, thank
They're,
you.
they're not gonna come in 30 years from now and say, hey, I do RV parks. They have to be there, they can kind of think,
Right.
but the city's not gonna do the project.
To do it for them.
One RV.
Okay, thank you for explaining it
But-
to me.
When enough people holler in their houses and all their septic are failing, a council that doesn't realize what we did about trails 5 years ago. The city will be, they got to sell their lots cheaper so that the city can supply them sewer
Right,
30 years.
right.
I think is what's gonna happen.
Okay, we got about 5 different conversations going and the clock's ticking. Are we okay with this one coming up? Because we've approved it on first reading. Right? So you get one more bite at the apple on this in real life. At a meeting. Everybody okay?
Yeah, I'd like for us to keep the same standards that we applied first reading.
Or do we want to add anything? After first reading, are you thinking of anything?
I'm not.
You're not, okay. I'm too confused to think of it.
Although I would like what Brian Jason was talking about to make sure we know that we've got the proper open space. 'Cause we see-
Yeah, we'll double check that. I mean, if they just haven't quantified it, then you look at it and say, hey, that looks good, but we need a calculation.
Right, so you'll be able to give us an answer to that in workshop Thursday?
Yes.
Okay,
Are y'all gonna want a presentation on this again, since it's been?
you could change, yes, I think a short one to remind everybody. No. Right back at me.
Show you the site plan, show you the conditions.
Yep,
What
that-
you added at
that
first.
we added at first reading. Shows all the conditions at first reading, that if it was
And if-
approved as is, what are we subjecting them to?
And if there are other, and you'll talk about the open space that
Yeah. we'll
Brian
clarify
brought
that.
up, and you'll, if there are other things that come up between now and then that you think you're recommending we consider adding, you'll outline that.
I don't think we're considering adding anything to
At-
this
at
one
this
beyond what
moment,
y'all have
I'm
already
saying
added.
Between now and then, something were to, a brainstorm hit you.
Well, it needs to hit you.
Yeah.
I think, since,
I'm not-
I mean, it's,
I'm
yeah,
saying-
they're not gonna go in and make changes to what we've
I
already.
didn't say make changes, never mind for that.
Okay, are we good?
We're dead.
Okay, very good. Then at this time, which is 20 minutes until 4, the council will enter into executive session. And that will be to discuss the employment duties and work plans of the city manager pursuant to Texas Government Code 551074. Council will meet in executive session, to discuss the employment duties of the city manager, no final action will be taken.